The nightmare always began the same way. Smoke thick as wool, choking every breath, the screams of 500 soldiers dying under his command, faces he had memorized over 80 years, burning into ash, blown away by winter wind. Connor Ironwood woke with his heart hammering against ribs that had survived 3 wars and too many betrayals to count. His hand reached instinctively for the sword beside his bed, fingers closing around cold steel before his mind caught up to his training. No battle, no enemy, just the empty darkness of a king's chamber, vast and silent as a tomb. He sat up slowly, gray threading through black hair that used to be the color of midnight without stars. 67 years old. His father had died at 75, his grandfather at 72. The weight of borrowed time pressed against his chest like winter frost. Most wolves his age had retired to advisory roles, content to let younger alphas patrol borders and enforce laws. Connor had tried that once, 50 years ago, after Lyanna died with their stillborn son in her arms. 3 months of sitting in council chambers had nearly driven him mad. He returned to active duty the day after he buried the last of his hope. Dawn light filtered through narrow windows carved into mountain stone. The Iron Peak Citadel stood at the apex of the Northern Territories, a fortress built by his grandfather's grandfather when wolves still fought humans for dominance. Now humans were nothing but scattered settlements beyond the tree line, and wolves fought only each other. Progress, the elders called it. Connor called it a waste of perfectly good warriors. A knock echoed against thick oak. 3 sharp raps, pause, 2 more. Declan Steelheart's signature. "Come in," Connor said. His voice carried the graveled weight of too many shouted orders across too many battlefields. The door opened and his beta entered, silver bright in dark hair, eyes the color of storm clouds before lightning. Declan had fought beside him for 80 years, lost 2 mates and 3 children to war and sickness, and never once complained. He looked at Connor with the expression of a man who had witnessed his commander's nightmares 1,000 times and knew better than to acknowledge them. "Patrol is ready, Your Majesty. Northern border sweep. Finn says the ice pass will seal by nightfall if this blizzard keeps up." Connor stood, rolling shoulders that ached with phantom weight. The years accumulated in joints and muscle, small reminders that time won battles even the strongest warriors could not. "Then we leave now." The inner circle waited in the courtyard, breath misting an air so cold it burned. 5 men, all veterans of the Great War 80 years past, all bearing scars visible and otherwise. Finn Greystone checked supply packs with methodical precision, his tactical mind already mapping routes through mountain passes. Rowan Ashford adjusted medical supplies in leather satchels, healer's hands steady despite the bitter wind. Thorin Blackwater sharpened a blade that needed no sharpening, Scout's eyes watching the tree line out of habit. Garrett Ironside inspected weapons with the focus of a man who had seen what happened when steel failed at the critical moment. These men were not just his command structure. They were the last remnants of a battalion that once numbered 500. They were brothers forged in blood and bound by the knowledge that they had survived when better men had not. Connor mounted his warhorse, a massive gray gelding with eyes like old coins and patience earned through decades of service. The inner circle fell into formation without orders, each man knowing his position as instinctively as breathing. They rode through gates built to withstand siege engines, out into wilderness painted white by the worst blizzard the Northern Territories had seen in 200 years. The wind shrieked like a living thing. It tore at thick winter pelts and bit through leather gloves with teeth made of ice. Connor had patrolled these borders for decades, knew every stone outcropping and frozen stream, but the blizzard transformed familiar landscape into something alien and hostile. Visibility dropped to arm's length. The world became nothing but white chaos and the steady rhythm of hooves punching through snowdrifts. Finn rode close, shouting over the wind's roar. "Pass will be impassable within 3 hours. Recommend we turn back." Connor raised a gloved hand, signaling halt. The column stopped, 6 riders forming a tight cluster against the blizzard's fury. He tilted his head, senses reaching out through the storm. Wolves possessed heightened awareness beyond human capability, generations of evolution granting sharper hearing, keener scent, faster reflexes. Connor had honed his senses across 8 decades of war. He could smell blood on the wind from a mile away, hear a heartbeat through 6 inches of stone, sense danger the way other men sense changes in weather. Something was wrong. The wind carried more than ice and pine. Beneath it, beneath the sharp mineral scent of snow and stone, something else threaded through the storm. Faint, desperate. Milk and fear and blood mixed with a fragrance he had not encountered in 50 years. His dead wife's scent, impossible as sunrise at midnight, hanging in frozen air like a ghost's whisper. "We continue," Connor said. His voice held the tone that bent battlefields to his will. "One more sweep." Declan exchanged glances with the others but said nothing. They had learned long ago not to question their commander's instincts. Those instincts had kept them alive when everyone else had died. They rode deeper into the blizzard, following the faint trace of wrongness that Connor could not name but refused to ignore. The emptiness that had plagued him for 5 decades felt suddenly sharper, a wound reopened by winter wind. He had spent half a century convincing himself that purpose could substitute for connection, that duty could fill the void where love had been. The lie had sustained him through endless patrols and empty nights. Now it crumbled under the weight of a scent that should not exist. Thorin signaled from the front. Movement ahead, 200 meters northeast. Connor urged his mount forward, the inner circle falling in behind. They crested a ridge and descended into a shallow valley where ancient pines stood like cathedral pillars draped in white. There, at the base of a massive snowdrift, something was wrong with the shape of the world. The snow rose in a mound that breathed with shallow, dying rhythm. Connor dismounted before his horse fully stopped. He crossed the distance in long strides, dropping to his knees beside the drift. His bare hands plunged into snow hard-packed as concrete, wolf strength shattering ice that would have broken lesser bones. He dug with single-minded ferocity, throwing white powder behind him in clouds that the wind immediately scattered. First he uncovered hair, pure white, cascading like silk despite being matted with ice, then a shoulder, impossibly pale, then a face that stopped his heart. She was an Omega. He knew it instantly from the submissive sweetness of her scent, the delicate bone structure that spoke of a body built for nurturing rather than fighting. But unlike any Omega he had ever seen. Albino, skin the color of fresh cream, eyelashes and hair stark silver white that seemed to capture what little light penetrated the storm. She was beautiful in the way that statues were beautiful, carved from moonlight and tragedy. She was also dying. Connor's hands found more than just her body. She was curled in a tight ball, arms locked around something wrapped in frozen rags and fur. He dug faster, heart suddenly hammering with fear he had not felt since the day Lyanna's breathing stopped. The bundle shifted. A tiny sound emerged, part whimper and part mewling cry. A pup, then another sound, and another. "By the goddess," Declan breathed from behind him. He had dismounted and stood staring at what Connor's frantic digging revealed. 6 pups. 6 impossibly small bodies packed against the Omega's chest, sheltered by her failing warmth. Their fur ranged from pure white to silver gray to black as midnight. Different ages, Connor realized with growing horror. Some barely furred, newborn perhaps, with closed eyes and weak trembling. The other 3 were slightly larger, maybe 3 weeks old, eyes open but dull with starvation. She had not just been protecting her own young. She had been carrying someone else's children into the storm. "Medical tent," Connor ordered, his voice cracking with an authority that bent reality to his will. "Now." The inner circle exploded into motion. They had trained together for 8 decades, moved with the synchronized efficiency of men who had set up emergency shelters under enemy fire and treated battlefield wounds with arrows still falling around them. Within minutes, a thick canvas tent bloomed against the blizzard's fury, heated stones radiating warmth into enclosed space. Connor carried the Omega inside himself, refusing to delegate, cradling her weight against his chest. She felt like nothing, bones wrapped in skin and ice. As he lifted her, the bundle in her arms shifted again. 6 tiny faces peeked from rags and frozen fur. One pup squeaked, the sound piercing his chest like hot iron. Connor's gaze swept over them, taking inventory with the detached assessment of a commander counting casualties. 3 smaller, newborn with eyes still closed. 3 larger, old enough to see but barely. All of them trembling on the edge of death. Rowan was already working, healer's hands moving with practiced speed. He cut away frozen rags, revealing the full scope of what the blizzard had tried to kill. The Omega's body was emaciated, ribs stark beneath pale skin. Whip scars crossed her back in neat parallel lines. Burn marks dotted her arms where someone had deliberately pressed hot metal to flesh. Her hands were bloody from digging, nails torn, fingers blue with frostbite. "Hypothermia," Rowan said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Severe malnutrition. She has been starving for weeks, maybe longer." He examined the pups with gentle efficiency, checking each small body for signs of life. "They are barely alive. No milk. She has nothing left to give them." Connor felt something dark and molten settle into his bones. This was not random tragedy. This was not an accident. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had sent an Omega and 6 defenseless pups into the worst blizzard in 2 centuries and expected nature to complete their murder. "Keep them alive," Connor said. "All of them." Rowan met his gaze and nodded once. He had heard that tone before, in field hospitals with wounded men bleeding out, when Connor had demanded the impossible and received it through sheer force of will. The healer turned back to his work, rubbing the smallest pup's chest with warmed cloth, forcing weak circulation back into failing body. Connor knelt beside the Omega. Her breathing was shallow, each exhale a faint mist in warming air. He placed his large hand on her forehead, brushing back white hair matted with ice. Her skin felt like touching snow, so cold it burned. He had seen death too many times not to recognize its approach. She was minutes away from letting go, surrendering to the peace that came when cold stopped hurting and sleep became eternal. He leaned close, voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear even unconscious. "I have you. You are safe. I swear it." His other hand moved to cover hers where it clutched the smallest pup, white-furred and barely bigger than his palm. The moment his skin touched hers, electricity shot up his arm and slammed into his chest with the force of a warhorse's kick. The mate bond. 50 years since Liana died, and he had accepted that fate would not grant him another. Wolves mated once, sometimes twice if fortune favored them. 3 times was myth. Yet here it was, unmistakable as sunrise, the sacred thread that tied soul to soul and promised either salvation or utter destruction. He felt it sink hooks into his heart and pull, demanding recognition, commanding response. Connor's eyes snapped to her face. Even through ice and exhaustion, even with death's shadow darkening her features, he could see it now. The delicate bone structure, the way her white hair caught what little light penetrated the tent. And when her eyes flickered open for half a second before closing again, he saw them clearly. Rose pink, the exact color of Liana's eyes. The marker of blood so rare the elders called it myth. "Connor," Declan said from the tent entrance. His beta's voice carried concern that only 8 decades of brotherhood could interpret. "What is it?" Connor could not speak, could not move, could only kneel there with his hand covering hers, feeling the mate bond wrap around his ribcage and squeeze until breathing became an act of conscious will. Fate had not granted him mercy. Fate had given him a test. Save this woman, this dying Omega carrying 6 pups that were not all hers, or watch his second chance freeze to death in his arms. "She is my mate," Connor finally said. The words fell into the tent's warmth like stones into still water, creating ripples that would reshape everything. Declan's expression shifted from concern to something harder to define. Hope, perhaps, mixed with fear. The last time Connor had found his mate, she had died screaming. The beta opened his mouth to respond, but Connor raised a hand, silencing him. "Get her warm. Get them all warm. We hold position until the storm breaks." The inner circle worked through the night. Garrett stripped off his outer layers and lay beside the 3 smallest pups, using his body heat to force warmth into failing systems. Finn prepared weak broth from their emergency rations, heating it over stones until steam rose in pale clouds. Thorin stood watch at the tent entrance, eyes scanning the blizzard for threats that would not come but might. Declan organized their supplies with the efficiency of a man who had managed logistics through 3 wars. Connor sat beside the Omega, holding 2 of the smallest pups inside his tunic, pressed against his chest. Their tiny bodies trembled against his skin. One was pure white, matching her hair. The other was black as void. He could feel their weak heartbeats, butterfly fragile, fighting to keep rhythm. He had held dying soldiers like this, trying to warm them when warmth was all he had left to give. Most had died anyway. These pups would not. He would not permit it. Hours passed. The blizzard howled outside their shelter, a beast made of wind and ice that wanted inside. Connor did not move from his position. The Omega's breathing gradually strengthened, color returning to her lips in increments almost too small to measure. Rowan worked tirelessly, dripping warm liquid into the pups' mouths, massaging their small chests when breathing faltered, monitoring each fragile life with the focus of a man who had lost too many patients and refused to lose more. "Your Majesty," Finn said quietly, "we should discuss what happens when she wakes." Connor looked at his tactical officer, at the man who had planned 1,000 campaigns and never led them astray. "What happens is, I find out who did this, and then I end them." The pronouncement fell into the tense warmth with the weight of absolute certainty. The inner circle exchanged glances. They knew that tone. They had heard it before battles that became legend, before sieges that broke enemy strongholds, before executions that reshaped political landscapes. When Connor Ironwood spoke in that voice, reality itself seemed to bend in accommodation. "She will tell us," Rowan said, "when she is strong enough." He checked the Omega's pulse, counted heartbeats with healer's precision. Her body has been through prolonged trauma. These injuries are not from the storm. Someone hurt her repeatedly, over months or years. Connor's hand curled into a fist. The urge to shift, to let his wolf form emerge and hunt through the blizzard until he found the one responsible, nearly overwhelmed reason. But shifting now would mean leaving her, and the mate bond would not permit it. The bond was new and raw, pulling at his chest like fishhooks embedded in muscle. He had forgotten how intense it could be in the first hours, how completely it rewrote priorities and demolished carefully constructed walls. "We wait," Connor said. "When she wakes, we listen, then we act." Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through canvas walls. The blizzard had not lessened. If anything, it had intensified, wind screaming with renewed fury, as if personally offended by their survival. But inside the tent, warmth held. The 6 pups had stabilized, their breathing stronger, tiny bodies beginning to seek food with instinctive hunger. Rowan produced goat's milk from their supplies, a luxury kept for emergency rations, and carefully fed each pup with a cloth dipped in warmed liquid. The Omega stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, silver white lashes casting tiny shadows on pale cheeks. Connor felt the moment she began to wake, the mate bond transmitting her rising consciousness like thunder felt before heard. He set the 2 pups aside, settling them with their siblings on the pile of furs Garrett had arranged, and turned his full attention to the woman who fate had dropped into his life. Her eyes opened, rose pink, exactly as he remembered from that half-second glimpse. They blinked, unfocused, trying to make sense of surroundings that made no sense. Then they found him, and pure, undiluted terror filled them. She shot upright with a scream that died in her raw throat, scrambled backward, hands scrabbling for purchase on furs, eyes wild with panic. Her gaze darted around the tent, counting exits, measuring distances, calculating escape routes, even as her body shook with exhaustion that should have kept her unconscious. "You are safe," Connor said. He kept his voice low, calm, the tone he used with spooked horses and traumatized soldiers. He did not move, did not approach, kept his hands visible and open. "I am Connor Ironwood. You are in my territory, under my protection." She stared at him, chest heaving with breaths that came too fast. Then her eyes found the pups, 6 small bodies piled together on furs, and everything else ceased to matter. She lunged for them, ignoring her own pain, her own weakness, gathering all 6 into her arms with a mother's desperate strength. "My babies," she choked out. The words were barely more than breath. "Please, no more, please." "They are safe," Connor said. "My healer has tended them. They are warming. They are alive." She counted them, hands moving over each small body, checking for breathing, for warmth, for signs of life. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When she reached 6, something broke in her face. Not tears yet, but the precursor to tears, the moment before grief or relief crashes through whatever dam has been holding it back. "Omega," Connor said gently. "What is your name?" She flinched at being addressed directly. Her arms tightened around the pups, body curling to shield them, even as she looked at him with eyes that expected cruelty, because cruelty was all she had ever known from alphas. "Seraphina?" she whispered. "My name is Seraphina. They call me Sarah." Sarah. He tasted the name, found it suited her. "Sarah, you are safe here. No one will hurt you. No one will hurt them." He gestured to Rowan, who approached slowly with a bowl of warm broth. "This is Rowan Ashford, my chief healer. You must drink." She looked at the bowl like it might be poison. Her eyes flicked from Rowan to Connor to the tent entrance where Declan stood watch, calculating odds, measuring threats, finding only danger because when you had been hurt enough, everywhere was dangerous. "Why?" she said. The single word carried the weight of a lifetime of betrayal. "Why are you helping me?" The question struck Connor like a physical blow. What kind of hell had she endured that basic decency was incomprehensible? That protection was suspicious rather than expected? "Because it is the law," Connor said. His voice took on the formal cadence of royal decree. "The king's law. Omegas and pups are to be protected above all others. That is not negotiable. That is not conditional. That is absolute." Her head snapped up. "The king. You said your name was Connor Ironwood. I am Alpha King Connor Ironwood, ruler of the Northern Territories, and you are under my protection." Her face went even paler, which Connor had not thought possible. She was not just in an Alpha's tent. She was in the king's tent. Whatever she had run from, wherever she had come from, she had landed in the one place that could either save her or destroy her more completely than any blizzard. She started, then stopped. Her eyes dropped to the pups in her arms. "I am nothing, Your Majesty. I am not worth your time." "You are worth my time," Connor said. He moved slowly, carefully, reducing the distance between them by inches rather than feet. "You carried 6 pups through the worst storm in 2 centuries. You nearly died keeping them alive. That makes you worth considerably more than you believe." She looked at him then, really looked at him, saw the gray in his black hair, the scars on his hands, the weight in his eyes that came from carrying too many dead. Something in her expression shifted, terror giving way to confusion, giving way to cautious, fragile hope. "The pups," she said. 3 are mine. The other 3 belong to Marin." "Who is Marin?" Sarah's breath hitched. Was. Who was Marin? She was the Omega mate of Alpha Marcus Blackridge. She gave him 3 pups, and he killed her for it. Silence fell inside the tent. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault, but inside, the only sound was breathing. Connor felt rage beginning to build, the slow, molten heat that preceded violence. He kept it locked behind walls built across 8 decades of discipline. "Tell me," he said. So she did. The story came in fragments, broken pieces that she assembled with shaking voice and hands that would not stop trembling. She had been found as an infant, abandoned in the woods near Blackridge territory. Alpha Marcus's father had taken her in, not out of kindness, but because Omega servants were useful. She had been raised as something between slave and scapegoat, blamed for every misfortune, beaten for every imagined slight. Her albinism made it worse. White hair and pink eyes marked her as defective in their eyes, a bad omen, a creature touched by unnatural forces. They called her ghost, specter, curse-made flesh. They made sure she knew she was worthless. When she came of age, Marcus noticed her. Not with affection, with appetite. He took what he wanted, and when she became pregnant, he was furious. She was not fit to carry alpha blood, he had said. Her defective nature would taint his legacy. He ordered her to end the pregnancy. She refused. That was her crime, refusing to kill the lives growing inside her. Marin, Marcus's official mate, had spoken in her defense. Marin was kind, one of the few wolves who had shown Sarah any mercy. When Marin gave birth to 3 pups, and one was born with a clubbed paw, Marcus's fury turned to murder. He beat Marin to death in front of the entire pack, claiming she had dishonored him with weak offspring. Sarah had been in the crowd, 7 months pregnant, watching her only friend die. And when Marcus turned away, when everyone's attention was on the body, she made her choice. She ran to the nursery, grabbed Marin's 3 pups, and fled into the forest. She gave birth alone in a hollow log while the first snows fell. She had survived on stolen scraps, on berries frozen on branches, on water melted from ice. She had tried to feed 6 hungry mouths with milk her starving body could barely produce. And then the great blizzard came, and she knew they were dying. She had curled around all 6, trying to be their warmth, their shelter, their last comfort. She had prayed to the goddess for mercy, not for herself, but for them, for the innocent lives she had tried and failed to save. "I am sorry," she finished. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I failed them. I could not keep them safe." Connor looked at her, at this fragile woman who had endured years of abuse and still chosen to save children that were not her own, who had run into a blizzard rather than watch innocents die, who had given everything, including her own life, for 6 pups that half the packs would have abandoned without thought. "You did not fail," Connor said. His voice was rough with emotion he did not bother to hide. "You saved them. If you had not run, they would all be dead. If you had not protected them, they would have frozen. You are the reason they breathe." She stared at him, disbelief written across every line of her face. Connor reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he placed his hand over hers where it rested on the white pup's head. The mate bond flared, electric and demanding. Her eyes went wide. "You felt it," Connor said. "It was not a question." "Aye," she whispered. "What was that?" "The mate bond. You are my fated mate, Seraphina Whitlock, the one the goddess marked for me." Tears finally came, spilling down her cheeks in hot tracks that froze almost immediately in the tense, imperfect warmth. No, that is not possible. I am cursed. I am defective. I am not. I cannot be." "You are exactly who you are meant to be," Connor said, "and I am going to make sure no one ever hurts you again." The oath fell into the space between them with the weight of mountains. Sarah looked at him, at this scarred warrior king who knelt before her like she was something precious instead of something broken. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that safety might be more than a fantasy. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. The blizzard raged outside, trapping them in canvas walls that smelled of smoke and wet fur. The inner circle maintained watch in shifts, never leaving the tent unguarded. Sarah slowly, painfully, began to eat. Rowan monitored her health with obsessive attention, noting every degree her body temperature rose, every ounce of weight she regained. The 6 pups stabilized and then began to thrive. Their weak cries grew stronger, demanding food with increasing insistence. Rowan had produced enough goat's milk to feed them in rotation, and color returned to tiny faces that had been gray with approaching death. Wolves aged rapidly in their early months, bodies maturing at twice the rate of human infants to ensure survival in harsh conditions. Already the pups' eyes seemed brighter, their movements more coordinated. The white pup, smallest of the 6, seemed particularly attached to Connor. Whenever he sat near the pile of furs, the tiny creature would crawl toward him with uncoordinated movements, seeking warmth and safety. "You have a shadow," Declan observed one evening. He nodded toward the pup currently sleeping on Connor's chest, tucked inside his tunic. Connor looked down at the small white bundle, felt its heartbeat against his ribs. What should we name them? Sarah, who had been dozing against the tent wall, opened her eyes. "You want to name them?" "They need names," Connor said. "They are not just pups, they are survivors. They deserve identity." Sarah studied him, this alpha king who spoke of omega pups like they mattered, who held them with hands that had killed enemies and built kingdoms. Very slowly, she crawled forward, closing the distance between them. She pointed to the white pup on Connor's chest. "Ash," she said softly, "for ash that rises from fire." He was the firstborn. The others are Kai and Raya, the black twins. They came together. "And Marin's 3? Her voice broke slightly. "Gray, because he is silver like dawn. Tessa, because she never stops moving even in sleep. And Owen." She touched the pup with the clubbed paw, the one Marcus had called Defective. "Owen, because he survived when they tried to kill him." Connor nodded. "Good names. Strong names." He looked at the 6 pups, committing each one to memory. "Ash, Kai, Raya, Gray, Tessa, Owen. You are pack now. You are mine to protect." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "Why? Why do you care so much?" Connor met her gaze, and for a moment allowed the walls to drop. 50 years ago, my mate died giving birth to our son. They both died, and I could not save them. I have spent half a century wondering if I failed them, if there was something more I could have done. You are giving me a chance to not fail again. That is worth everything." The tent fell silent, except for the wind's howl and the soft breathing of 6 sleeping pups. Sarah reached out, hesitant, and placed her hand on Connor's arm. The mate bond hummed between them, not demanding, just present, a connection that asked nothing except acknowledgement. "I do not know how to be a mate," she said. "I do not know how to be anything except afraid." "Then we will learn together," Connor said. "Because I am fairly certain I forgot how to be a mate decades ago." A smile, small and fragile as spring ice, touched her lips. It was the first time Connor had seen her smile, and the sight of it did something dangerous to his carefully maintained emotional control. On the 3rd day, the blizzard finally broke. Dawn arrived with weak sunlight that barely penetrated the cloud cover, but was enough to navigate by. Connor stood at the tent entrance, surveying the transformed landscape. Snow had buried the valley under 10 feet of white powder. The pass they had come through was completely sealed, just as Finn had predicted. "We will take the southern route back to Iron Peak," Finn said, studying his maps. 3 days' travel if the weather holds, 4 if it does not. Connor nodded. "Prepare to move out within the hour." He turned back to the tent where Sarah sat with the 6 pups, counting them obsessively as if they might disappear if she looked away. "We are going home." "Home," she repeated, tasting the word like it was foreign. "I do not have a home." "You do now." The journey to Iron Peak took 4 days. They traveled slowly, mindful of Sarah's weakness and the pup's fragility. Connor insisted Sarah ride with him, wrapped in his winter cloak, the 6 pups bundled against her chest in a carrier Rowan had fashioned from leather and fur. The inner circle formed a protective circle around them, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats. Sarah barely spoke during the journey. She seemed overwhelmed by the scale of the world beyond Blackridge territory, by the kindness of men who should have ignored her, by the reality of an alpha king who held her like she was made of glass and treated her like she mattered. On the 2nd night, camped in a sheltered valley, Connor found her awake while the others slept. She was staring at the stars, visible for the first time since the blizzard, her expression unreadable. "Cannot sleep?" Connor asked quietly. She shook her head. "I keep expecting to wake up, for this to be a dream before I die." Connor sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "This is real, Sarah. You are alive. They are alive." He nodded to the pups sleeping in a pile near the fire, carefully supervised by Garrett, who had volunteered for first watch. "At Blackridge," she said slowly, "they told me I was cursed, that my white hair meant death followed me, that anyone who showed me kindness would suffer for it." She turned to look at him. "Are you not afraid?" "I have spent 8 decades at war," Connor said. "I have buried 500 soldiers, 2 mates, and countless friends. Death has followed me my entire life, and I am still here. If you are cursed, then we are well matched." She almost smiled. Almost. "What if I bring you harm? What if the curse is real? Then we will face it together." The simplicity of this statement, the absolute certainty in his voice, seemed to reach something deep inside her. She leaned slightly, just barely, until her shoulder pressed against his. Connor did not move, did not push, just sat with her under stars that watched and judged nothing. On the 4th day, they crested a ridge and Iron Peak came into view. The citadel rose from mountain stone like it had grown there naturally, walls 50 feet high and 10 feet thick, guard towers positioned at intervals that allowed overlapping fields of fire. Sarah stared, mouth slightly open. "This is where you live?" "This is where we live," Connor corrected. He urged his horse forward, and the gates opened at his approach. Guards snapped to attention, and citizens stopped to stare at their king returning from patrol with an omega wrapped in his cloak and 6 pups sleeping against her chest. Word spread through the citadel faster than fire through dry grass. The alpha king had found his mate, an albino omega with 6 pups. The whispers followed them through corridors carved from living stone, into the royal wing where rooms had stood empty for 50 years. Connor personally oversaw Sarah's settlement, ensuring she had chambers with a fireplace, soft furs, and windows that overlooked the mountain valley. The 6 pups were placed in a nursery adjacent to her room, attended by 6 retired female warriors who had lost their own children and grandchildren to war and time. They took to the pups with fierce protective joy, giving each one individual attention and endless patience. Sarah stood in the center of her chambers, turning slowly, trying to process the reality of thick rugs and warm fires and food that appeared without her having to steal it. "I do not understand," she said. "Why so much? I am nothing special." Connor took her hands in his. "You are my mate. That makes you Luna Queen of the Northern Territories. And even if you were not, even if fate had not marked you, you would still deserve safety. You would still deserve warmth. You would still deserve to live without fear." She looked up at him, pink eyes searching his face for deception and finding none. "I do not know how to be a queen. Neither did I know how to be a king when I was young," Connor said. "We will learn together." That night, Sarah slept in a real bed for the first time in her life. Connor stood in the doorway, watching her breathing even out, the 6 pups piled around her like a living blanket. He felt the mate bond settle into something less raw, more permanent, a connection that would only deepen with time. Declan found him there an hour later. "The council wants to meet tomorrow. They have questions." "They can wait," Connor said. "She needs time to adjust." "And you?" Declan asked. "How are you adjusting?" Connor did not answer immediately. He was still staring at Sarah, at this impossible woman who had survived what would have killed most warriors. "I spent 50 years alone," he finally said. "I had convinced myself I preferred it that way. Now I realize I was just waiting. For her? For purpose. She gave me that. They gave me that." Connor nodded toward the pups. "I failed once. I will not fail again." Declan placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "You did not fail, Liana. Childbirth kills, even with the best healers. You cannot blame yourself." "I can," Connor said. "And I did, for 50 years, but now I have a chance to do better." The beta studied him for a long moment. "Then I will make sure you have that chance." They stood together in the doorway, 2 old warriors watching over new life, and for the first time in decades, Connor felt something that might have been hope. The next morning brought disaster. Connor was meeting with the inner circle, discussing security arrangements and supply logistics, when a runner burst into the war room. His face was pale, breathing ragged from sprinting through corridors. "Your Majesty, assassin, Lady Seraphina's chambers." Connor moved before the words finished leaving the runner's mouth. He was through the door and down the hallway at a dead run, the inner circle close behind. His heart hammered with fear more intense than any he had felt on battlefields. Not her. Not now. Not when he had just found her. He burst through Sarah's door to find chaos, furniture overturned, blood on the floor, and Sarah standing in the corner, holding a fireplace poker with white-knuckled grip, the 6 pups huddled behind her. On the floor at her feet lay a male wolf, unconscious, with a massive knot rising on his temple. Garrett stood over the fallen wolf, fist still raised. "Got here just in time, Your Majesty." He tried to go through the window. Lady Seraphina hit him with the poker. "I finished the job." Connor crossed to Sarah in 3 strides. She flinched when he reached for her, then forced herself still. He gently pried the poker from her grip and pulled her against his chest. She stood rigid for a moment, then collapsed into him, shaking. "Are you hurt?" Connor demanded. "No." She pointed at the assassin. "He tried. He had a knife. I hit him. Then Garrett came." "You did well," Connor said into her hair. "You protected them. You did exactly right." Thorin was already examining the unconscious assassin. Rolled him over, pulled back his sleeve to reveal a tattoo. "Ravencrest mark," he announced. Connor's eyes went cold. Vivian Ravencrest. Declan moved to the window, checking sight lines. This was planned. They knew which room, which window. Someone inside the Citadel gave them information. Connor looked at the 6 pups, miraculously unharmed, sleeping through the chaos with the resilience of the very young. Then he looked at Sarah, still shaking in his arms. Then he looked at his inner circle, at men who had followed him through 80 years of war and never questioned his orders. "Mobilize the full guard," Connor said. His voice carried the weight of absolute command. "I want this Citadel locked down. No one enters, no one leaves. Every wolf gets questioned. I want to know who passed information, and I want to know now." "And the assassin?" Garrett asked. Connor walked to the unconscious male, looked down at the wolf who had tried to murder his mate. "We will have answers, one way or another." Sarah touched his arm. "Connor, please, do not become what they are because of me." He looked at her, at pink eyes that had seen too much cruelty and still asked for mercy. The rage inside him banked slightly, not gone but controlled. "Very well. He will talk, and then he will face justice, the proper way. Declan nodded. I will handle the interrogation. No, Connor said. I will handle it. He needs to understand that attempting to harm the Luna Queen is not merely a crime, it is a declaration of war. He turned back to Sarah, placing both hands on her shoulders. You are safe now. I am posting guards at your door. 4 of them, rotating shifts. No one gets in without my approval. She nodded, still trembling. The pups, she whispered, are safe. Connor called in the 6 elderly warriors who served as nurses. They arrived within minutes, immediately moving to comfort the pups who were beginning to wake and fuss. These women will not leave them, not for any reason. Sarah watched the nurses settle around her children with maternal efficiency. Then she looked back at Connor. This was because of me, because I am here, because I am alive. This was because someone is a coward who sends assassins in the night rather than facing their enemies in daylight, Connor corrected, and they just made the gravest mistake of their life. The assassination attempt changed everything. What had been a personal matter, the rescue of an Omega and her pups, became political. The message was clear. Someone wanted Sarah dead badly enough to breach the Alpha King's own citadel. That someone almost certainly was Vivian Ravencrest, and if Vivian wanted Sarah dead, it meant Marcus Blackridge was involved as well. Connor called an emergency council meeting that night. The inner circle gathered in the war room, maps spread across a massive oak table scarred by decades of planning sessions. Connor stood at the head, Sarah beside him. She had tried to stay in her chambers, insisting she did not belong in war councils, but Connor had been immovable. She was Luna Queen. Her voice mattered. The facts are simple, Connor began. Marcus Blackridge murdered his mate Marin for bearing pups he deemed weak. He attempted to murder 3 innocent pups. He assaulted and impregnated Omega Seraphina against her will. And now his ally Vivian Ravencrest has sent an assassin into my home to finish the job Marcus started in the blizzard. What is your recommendation, Your Majesty? Finn asked. His tactical mind was already working, calculating forces and supply lines. Connor placed both hands on the table. We invoke Lex Regis, the King's Law. I am calling Marcus to trial for murder, for attempted murder, and for assault of an Omega. Public trial. He cannot refuse without losing his honor and his pack. And if he refuses anyway? Rowan asked. Then we march to war, Connor said. His voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of a man who had marched to war too many times and found no glory in it, only necessary horror. But I do not believe he will refuse. Marcus is many things, but he understands pack law. He will come. What about Vivian? Garrett asked. She sent the assassin. We prove it first, Connor said. Declan is interrogating the prisoner now. Once we have confirmation, Vivian will face the same charges. Conspiracy to commit murder of a Luna Queen is treason. The penalty is death or exile. Sarah had been silent through the entire discussion. Now she spoke, voice quiet but steady. What if they come after the pups? What if this is not about me at all, but about them? Every eye in the room turned to her. Connor's expression shifted to something that might have been pride. Explain. Sarah took a breath. Marin's pups are Marcus's bloodline. If they live, they have claim to his territory when they come of age. My 3 pups carry alpha blood from him. She stumbled over the words, clearly uncomfortable. If all 6 survive and thrive, they represent a threat to Marcus's legacy. Vivian must have told him that killing them now prevents future challenges. Finn leaned forward. That makes tactical sense. Eliminate threats while they are vulnerable. He looked at Connor. Your Majesty, she is right. This is not just about Lady Seraphina. This is about succession and power. Then we protect all of them, Connor said. He looked at Sarah, saw the fear in her eyes, but also the determination. You are a mother protecting her children. That is the oldest and strongest motivation that exists. Marcus and Vivian do not understand that. They see pups as political tools. We see them as lives worth defending. That is the difference between us and them. What is the timeline? Thorin asked. Finn studied his maps. If we send runners now, they can reach Blackridge territory in 2 days. Marcus will need 3 days to mobilize and travel here. Call it a week before the trial begins. Then we have a week to prepare, Connor said. He looked at each member of his inner circle. I want security tripled. I want every entrance to this citadel guarded. I want scouts on every approach route. And I want weapons ready. You expect them to attack before the trial? Declan asked. I expect them to try, Connor said, and I intend to be ready. The council broke up shortly after. The inner circle dispersed to their assigned tasks, moving with the efficiency of men who had coordinated military operations for 8 decades. Connor remained in the war room with Sarah, the two of them standing before maps that showed territories and borders and all the places where wolves killed each other over power and pride. "Are you afraid?" Connor asked. Sarah considered the question. "Yes, but not for myself. For them, for the pups. They did not ask for any of this." "No one asks for war," Connor said. "It comes anyway. But you are not alone in this. We will protect them. All of us." He gestured to where the inner circle had been sitting. "Those men have lost everything. Wives, children, families. These 6 pups are the closest thing to grandchildren they will ever have. They will die before they let harm come to any of them." Sarah looked at him, this grizzled warrior king who spoke of protecting her children with absolute certainty. "You really mean that?" Every word. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of her, milk and fear, and something underneath that was purely her. The mate bond hummed between them, not urgent, but present, a promise waiting to be fulfilled when the time was right. "Thank you," she said, "for saving us, for caring, for being different than what I expected alphas to be." Connor reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with scarred fingers. "I am only what 80 years of war made me. But if that is enough to keep you safe, then every battle was worth it." They stood together in the war room, surrounded by maps of territory and plans for violence, and found a moment of peace in the eye of the approaching storm. Outside, guards took their positions. Scouts rode into the night. The citadel locked down tight as a fist. And in the royal chambers, 6 pups slept, unaware that their existence had just become the spark that would ignite conflict across the northern territories. The game was set. The pieces were moving. And Connor Ironwood, Alpha King, veteran of 3 wars and survivor of 50 years alone, prepared to fight one more battle. Not for territory, not for power, but for the family fate had given him in the winter of his life, when he had stopped believing in second chances. The week had begun, the trial would come, and before it ended, the northern territories would be reshaped by blood and law and the quiet strength of one Omega who refused to let anyone hurt her children ever again. The interrogation took 3 days. Connor did not use torture. He did not need to. The assassin, a young wolf barely past 20 with the Ravencrest tattoo still raw on his forearm, broke under the simple weight of Connor's presence. The Alpha King sat across a bare wooden table in the Citadel's holding cells and asked questions in a voice that expected truth, the way stone expected gravity. The young wolf provided it, words tumbling out in desperate confession. Vivian Ravencrest had sent him, paid him in gold and promises of rank within her pack. The target was specific, the albino Omega in the royal chambers. Make it look like an accident if possible. If not possible, make it quick and escape through the North Tower. There were sympathizers inside the Citadel who would provide safe passage. "Who?" Connor asked, and his voice could have frozen blood. The assassin gave 4 names, 2 servants, 1 junior guard, and a council elder who had served Connor's father. Declan had them arrested within the hour. By evening, all 4 had confessed to passing information to Ravencrest agents. The elder claimed he had done it to prevent war, believing that removing the Omega would eliminate the source of conflict. Connor stripped him of his title and lands. The others faced exile. But Connor's focus remained on the larger question. Why did Vivian want Sarah dead badly enough to risk infiltrating the Alpha King's stronghold? Rowan spent 2 days in the Citadel's archives, digging through birth records and bloodline documentation that dated back centuries. He emerged pale and trembling, carrying a leather-bound tome so old the pages crumbled at the edges. He laid it before Connor in the war room with the reverence of a man presenting sacred text. "Your Majesty, you need to see this." Connor opened the tome carefully. The pages contained genealogies, bloodline maps drawn in faded ink by scribes long dead. Rowan pointed to a specific entry, his finger hovering over names written in ancient script. Alpha Magnus Whitlock. Ruled the Whitlock territory 28 years ago. Had 2 mates. First mate, Helena Ravencrest, bore him 1 daughter, Vivian. Second mate, an Omega named Lydia, bore him another daughter 3 years later. Connor read the names, following the bloodline down the page. The second daughter's name was Seraphina. They are sisters, Connor said quietly. Half-sisters, Rowan corrected. Same father, different mothers. According to these records, Magnus Whitlock died when Vivian was 11 years old. Cause of death listed as sudden illness. The Omega mate Lydia disappeared the same night. The infant Seraphina was declared lost in the forest, presumed dead. But she did not die, Connor said. He was already piecing it together, the shape of a conspiracy 28 years old. Someone found her. Blackridge Pack. Yes, Rowan said. And Vivian has spent nearly 3 decades believing her half-sister was dead. Until now. Connor closed the tome, his mind working through implications with the efficiency of 8 decades spent commanding armies. If Vivian learns that Sarah survived, that she is not only alive but mated to the Alpha King, it threatens everything Vivian has built, her claim to the Whitlock territory, her political alliances, her entire legacy. It is worse than that, Rowan said. He pulled out a second document, this one more recent. I found this in the medical archives. Blood analysis from when Queen Liana was alive. She had the same rare markers as Lady Seraphina. Rose-pink eyes, heightened vocal frequency that calmed aggressive wolves. The markers of Lunai Calste's bloodline. Connor felt something cold settle in his chest. Liana was Lunai Calste's, and she died giving birth. Under suspicious circumstances, Rowan said quietly. I reviewed the autopsy records. There were traces of a substance in her blood that the healer at the time could not identify. It dissipated within hours of death, leaving no evidence. Poison, possibly. Rowan met Connor's gaze. Your Majesty, if someone has been hunting Lunai Calste's bloodlines, if they killed Queen Liana, then Lady Seraphina is in greater danger than we realized. This is not just about political power. This is about eliminating a genetic line. Connor stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the training yards. Below, warriors drilled in formations perfected over generations. Beyond them, the mountain ranges stretched endlessly, hiding territories and packs and wolves who would kill for advantage. He had spent his life navigating this world, understanding its violence, its codes, its brutal hierarchy. But this was different. This was not war. This was extermination. How long until we march? Connor asked. 4 days, Declan said from the doorway. He had been listening, silent as shadows. Runners left this morning. They carry the Lex Regis summons. Marcus Blackridge will receive it tomorrow at dawn. He has 5 days to appear for trial or be declared outlaw. And if he does not come? Then we bring the trial to him, Connor said, with steel. The war room fell silent. Outside, wind moved through mountain passes, carrying the scent of coming snow. Winter was not finished with the Northern Territories, neither was fate. Sarah found him on the battlements that night. Connor stood alone, watching stars emerge from behind scattered clouds, his breath misting in cold air. She approached quietly, wrapped in a thick wool cloak, her white hair catching moonlight and glowing like captured frost. You should be inside, Connor said without turning. It is too cold. I have been cold before, Sarah replied. She moved to stand beside him, looking out over the same view. This is warm compared to the blizzard. Connor glanced at her, this woman who had survived what would have killed most warriors, and felt the mate bond pull gently at his chest. He had been avoiding her, throwing himself into preparations because acknowledging what she was becoming to him felt dangerous, felt like hope, and hope was the most dangerous thing a soldier could carry. They told me, Sarah said softly, about Vivian, about Magnus Whitlock, about me having a sister who wants me dead. Connor nodded. I am sorry. It is a heavy burden to learn your family tried to kill you. I have no family, Sarah said. The flatness in her voice cut deeper than anger would have. I had a friend once. Marin. She died protecting me. That was family. You and your men protecting my pups, that is family. Blood means nothing. Connor turned to face her fully. Blood means something to Vivian. It means claim and territory and power. She will not stop until you are dead, or she is. Then we stop her, Sarah said. She met his gaze, pink eyes steady. I am tired of running. I am tired of being afraid. If she wants to come for me, let her come. But she will not touch my children. The steel in her voice, the absolute certainty, reminded Connor of warriors he had commanded in the Great War, men and women who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. They had been the most dangerous soldiers on any battlefield. You will not face her alone, Connor said. When we march to Blackridge, you will stay here, safe, protected. No. The word hung in the cold air between them. Connor's eyes narrowed. This is not negotiable. You are right, Sarah said. It is not. I am going with you. It is too dangerous. So was the blizzard. So was stealing 6 pups from an alpha who had just murdered his mate. So was surviving 28 years of abuse. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her pink eyes. I am not fragile, Connor. I am a survivor, and I will not hide while you fight my battles. Connor studied her, this Omega who had more courage than most alphas he had known. The mate bond hummed between them, not demanding, just present, a reminder that fate had bound them for reasons neither fully understood yet. Very well, Connor said finally, but you stay with Rowan and Garrett at the camp perimeter. If battle comes, they evacuate you immediately. No arguments. Sarah nodded. No arguments. They stood together on the battlements, 2 souls connected by fate and circumstance, watching stars wheel overhead. The march would begin in 4 days. In 5 days, they would face the wolves who had tried to kill her and her children. But for now, for this moment, they simply stood in the cold and found warmth in each other's presence. The next 3 days passed in controlled urgency. The Citadel transformed from seat of government into war machine. Warriors drilled in the courtyard, formations tightening, timing perfected. Supply wagons were loaded with food, water, medical supplies, spare weapons. Scouts ranged out in all directions, mapping routes to Black Ridge territory and back, identifying defensible positions and potential ambush sites. The inner circle coordinated everything with the synchronized efficiency of men who had done this countless times before. Garrett inspected weapon edges, testing balance and weight. Thorin oiled leather straps on scout gear, fingers moving with practiced speed. Finn reviewed supply manifests, calculating exactly how much 50 warriors would need for a week's campaign. Rowan packed medical supplies, his kit expanding to include treatments for combat wounds. Declan stood at the center, orchestrating logistics with calm authority earned through 8 decades as Connor's right hand. He looked up as Connor entered the armory, saw something in his commander's expression, and dismissed the others with a subtle gesture. When they were alone, Declan spoke. You are bringing her. Connor did not ask how his beta knew. They had fought together too long for secrets. Yes, that is a mistake. Probably, Connor agreed. He selected a sword from the weapon rack, testing its weight. But it is her choice, and I will not take that from her. She is not a warrior. No, Connor said. He sheathed the sword and met Declan's gaze. She is something rarer. She is someone who knows what it costs to protect the innocent and chooses to pay that price anyway. That makes her braver than half the warriors I have commanded. Declan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. You care for her. Truly. I do, Connor admitted. More than I expected, more than I thought I could again. Lyanna has been gone 50 years, and I grieved for 49 of them, Connor said. But Sarah is not a replacement. She is not Lyanna returned. She is herself, and I am starting to think that is exactly who I need. Declan placed a hand on Connor's shoulder, the gesture of a brother, not a subordinate. Then we protect her. All of us. Like we protected each other in the Great War. Connor nodded. Like we protected each other. Sarah spent the time with her 6 pups, memorizing their faces as if she might not see them again. The young wolves had grown noticeably in just the week since their rescue, their bodies responding to proper food and warmth with the accelerated development natural to their kind. Ash, the white pup, had grown strong enough to toddle after her on unsteady legs. Kai and Raya, the black twins, wrestled constantly, their bond evident in how they moved together. Gray, the natural leader, organized the others into neat piles when they slept. Tessa never stopped moving, exploring every corner of the nursery with fearless curiosity. Owen, with his clubbed paw, watched everything with quiet intelligence, compensating for his physical limitation with careful observation. The 6 elderly warriors who served as nurses had become fiercely protective. One of them, a grizzled female named Alara, who had lost 3 children to war, pulled Sarah aside the morning before departure. We will guard them with our lives, Luna Queen, Alara said. Her voice carried the certainty of absolute truth. Not one of us has forgotten what it means to lose children. These 6 will not suffer that fate. Sarah hugged her, this stranger who had become family. Thank you. When I return, remind me that I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You already repaid it," Alara said gently. "You gave us purpose again." On the morning of the 4th day, 50 warriors assembled in the courtyard. They wore light armor, prioritizing mobility over protection. Each carried enough supplies for a week's hard travel. Horses stamped and snorted in the cold air, breath misting like small dragons. The inner circle moved through the formation, checking gear, offering quiet words of encouragement, ensuring every detail met their exacting standards. Connor emerged from the keep wearing black leather armor marked with the silver wolf sigil of the Northern Territories. His sword rode at his back, the weapon he had carried through 3 wars and countless smaller conflicts. He looked exactly like what he was, an old warrior preparing for one more battle. Sarah followed, dressed in practical travel clothes with a knife at her belt that Garrett had insisted she carry. Her white hair was braided in a practical style that kept it out of her eyes. She looked small beside Connor's bulk, but her spine was straight and her expression was determined. She climbed into the supply wagon where Rowan and Garrett would ride, settling among medical supplies and emergency rations. Connor mounted his gray warhorse and surveyed his assembled force. 50 warriors, all veterans, all loyal beyond question. The inner circle formed the command structure. It was a small force compared to what Marcus and Vivian could field together. But Connor was not planning a siege. He was planning a trial. Law, not war. Justice, not conquest. "We ride for Blackridge," Connor announced. His voice carried across the courtyard, reaching every ear. "We go not as invaders, but as enforcers of pack law. Marcus Blackridge stands accused of murder and crimes against Omegas. He will face trial under Lex Regis, or he will face consequences. We are the King's justice. We do not start fights, but we finish them." A low growl of agreement rippled through the formation. These warriors understood. They would show restraint until restraint failed. Then they would show why Connor's forces had never lost a war. The gates opened. The column moved out, flowing through the gap like water through stone. Citizens of Iron Peak lined the streets, watching their Alpha King ride forth once more. Some cheered. Others simply watched with expressions that held hope and fear in equal measure. As they passed through the outer gates and onto the mountain road, Connor looked back once. The citadel stood against morning sky, impregnable and eternal. Inside those walls, 6 pups slept under the protection of warriors too old to fight, but not too old to die for what they loved. They rode. The journey to Blackridge territory took 3 days of hard travel through mountain passes that Thorin's scouts had mapped. They avoided main roads where ambush was possible. Each night they made camp in defensible positions, sentries posted at overlapping intervals, fires kept small to avoid detection. The inner circle rotated through watches, never all sleeping at the same time, old habits from old wars asserting themselves without conscious thought. Sarah remained with Rowan and Garrett, learning basic first aid and weapon handling during rest breaks. Garrett taught her how to hold the knife properly, how to slash rather than stab, how to aim for vulnerable spots if forced to fight. Rowan taught her which herbs could treat which wounds, how to tell if bleeding was manageable or critical. Both men treated her with gentle respect, like a daughter they wanted to protect, but knew must learn to protect herself. On the second night, Connor found Sarah sitting alone near the supply wagon, staring at stars. The camp was quiet, except for normal night sounds, warriors sleeping or standing watch, horses shifting in their picket lines. He sat beside her without asking permission, comfortable enough in their connection that proximity needed no justification. "What are you thinking?" Connor asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I am thinking about Vivian, about how she must have felt, 11 years old, watching her father dote on a baby that was not hers. I'm trying to understand what turns a child into someone who murders." "You pity her." "I pity what she could have been," Sarah said. She looked at Connor. What if Magnus had treated both daughters equally? What if Helena, her mother, had not filled her head with poison about Omega mates being lesser? What if someone had taught her that family was not a competition? Then she might have been different, Connor said. But she made her choices. We are all shaped by circumstance, but we are defined by what we do with those circumstances. "Did you make choices?" Sarah asked, "or did war make them for you?" The question struck deeper than Connor expected. He thought about it, really thought, searching through 8 decades of memory for the answer. Both, he finally said. War shaped me, molded me. But every day I chose to keep fighting. Every day I chose to protect those under my command. Even when it was easier to walk away, I chose to stay. And now? Now I choose you, Connor said simply. You and those 6 pups who did not ask for any of this. I choose to stand between you and anyone who wants to harm you. That is not duty, that is choice. Sarah leaned against him just slightly, a gesture of trust and connection. Thank you, she whispered. They sat together under stars that had watched countless wars and would watch countless more, 2 souls finding peace in the moment before violence. On the 3rd day, they crossed into Black Ridge territory. The landscape changed subtly, mountains giving way to rolling hills covered in pine forest. Thorin's scouts reported increased activity ahead. Black Ridge warriors on patrol, moving in groups of 5 or 6, alert but not mobilized for war. News of the king's approach had clearly reached Marcus, but he had not fled. That meant he would face trial. What it did not mean was that he would face it alone. An hour before sunset, as the column descended into the valley where Black Ridge Keep stood, Finn rode up beside Connor with a map marked in fresh ink. Your Majesty, we have a problem. Thorin's scouts report that Ravencrest forces have moved into Black Ridge territory. 200 warriors camped 3 miles west of the keep. They arrived yesterday. Connor studied the map, his tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. Vivian has allied openly with Marcus. She is not just conspiring, she is prepared to fight. Combined, they outnumber us 4 to 1, Finn said. If this comes to battle, we are at severe disadvantage. Then we make sure it does not come to battle, Connor said. We invoke Lex Regis publicly, in front of both packs. Marcus cannot refuse without losing the loyalty of his own warriors. Pack law is sacred. Even outlaws respect it. And if Vivian intervenes, then she reveals herself as Oathbreaker, Connor said, and every pack in the Northern Territories will turn against her. It is a gamble, Finn observed. Every battle is a gamble, Connor replied. We are simply betting on honor instead of steel. They made camp 2 miles from Black Ridge Keep, on a ridge that offered good sight lines and multiple retreat routes. Connor sent a formal messenger to Marcus with the Lex Regis summons, demanding his presence for trial the following day at noon. The messenger returned within an hour with Marcus's acceptance. The stage was set. That night, Connor called his inner circle together for final planning. They gathered around a small fire, 5 men who had served together longer than most warriors lived. Faces lined with age and scarred with experience, hands still steady despite decades of sword work, eyes still sharp despite seeing too much death. Tomorrow we walk into a situation where we are outnumbered and surrounded, Connor said without preamble. Vivian will try something. Marcus will try something. We prepare for everything. Defensive formations, Declan said. We form a circle around the trial ground. Any hostile movement, we collapse inward and evacuate Lady Seraphina. Medical stations at 3 points, Rowan added. If it goes wrong, we need to treat wounded quickly. Scouts on the perimeter, Thorin said. I want eyes on every approach. If they try to flank, I want warning. Weapons ready but sheathed until provoked, Garrett said. We show strength without aggression. Let them make the first mistake. Finn spread his map on the ground, marking positions with small stones. If we must retreat, we go north. Narrow pass, easily defended. They cannot use numbers against us there. Connor absorbed all of it, synthesizing individual expertise into unified strategy. Then he added his own piece. Sarah stays with Rowan and Garrett at the center of our formation. If battle comes, they get her out first. Everything else is secondary. The inner circle nodded. They understood. Protecting the Luna Queen was not just duty, it was purpose. Connor looked at each man in turn. We have been together a long time. Fought in wars that most wolves have forgotten. Lost people we loved, survived when we probably should not have. Tomorrow we face something different, not invaders or rebels, but our own kind, wolves judging wolves. It is messier than war, it is harder than war, but it is right. Declan smiled slightly. Old age has made you philosophical. Old age has made me tired, Connor corrected, but not too tired for one more fight. They sat together around the fire, brothers forged in blood and bound by loyalty, and found comfort in the familiar ritual of preparing for battle. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. Tonight, they had each other. Dawn came too quickly. The camp stirred as warriors prepared, checking armor one last time, testing sword edges, speaking in low voices. Breakfast was cold rations eaten quickly. No one wanted to risk fires that might reveal exact numbers or positions. They broke camp efficiently, leaving only trampled grass to mark their presence. Connor addressed his 50 warriors as the sun cleared the horizon. Today, we enforce the king's law. We do this by the old ways, under rules that have governed pack life for generations. Lex Regis grants us authority. Pack honor grants us legitimacy. We walk in knowing we are outnumbered. We walk in knowing danger surrounds us. We walk in anyway. The warriors formed up, not in battle formation, but in ceremonial guard. 2 columns, 25 to a side, with Connor at the head. The inner circle spread throughout, providing leadership at key positions. Sarah walked in the center, flanked by Rowan and Garrett, visible to all who watched. She was not hidden. She was not disguised. She was the Luna Queen, and she walked with her head high. They marched down from the ridge into the valley. Blackridge Keep rose before them, a fortified compound of timber and stone. The gates stood open. Warriors lined the walls, watching. Marcus Blackridge stood before the gates, 50 of his own warriors at his back. To his right, Vivian Ravencrest waited with her forces spread in loose formation across the field. 400 warriors watching 50. The message was clear. You are outnumbered. You are vulnerable. Turn back. Connor did not turn back. He walked forward until 20 paces separated him from Marcus, then stopped. His warriors halted in perfect unison, the discipline of professional soldiers on display. The valley fell silent, except for wind moving through grass and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Marcus Blackridge, Connor said, his voice carried across the field, reaching every ear. You stand accused under Lex Regis, murder of Omega Marin Blackridge, attempted murder of 3 pups, assault of Omega Seraphina Whitlock. You have been summoned to trial. Do you accept the king's justice? Marcus stepped forward. He was a large wolf, heavily muscled, with dark hair going silver at the temples. 45 years old and still in his prime. His expression was cold, calculated. I accept trial by the old laws. Murmurs rippled through the assembled packs. Trial by the old laws meant single combat, alpha against alpha, with the winner's judgment becoming law. It was archaic, brutal, and completely legal. Connor nodded slowly. So be it. Vivian moved then, gliding forward with predatory grace. She was beautiful in a dangerous way, red hair catching sunlight, green eyes cold as winter ice. Your Majesty, she said, her voice carrying false respect. Surely there is no need for bloodshed. Perhaps we can negotiate terms. There are no terms for murder, Connor said flatly. Vivian smiled, thin and sharp. But there are witnesses who dispute that version of events. She gestured behind her. 3 Blackridge wolves stepped forward, all wearing expressions of rehearsed certainty. They will testify that Marin died by accident, that the pups were abandoned by a mad Omega who fled into the storm. Connor looked at the 3 witnesses, saw the fear underneath their loyalty. Fear of Marcus, fear of what would happen if they told truth. He had seen this before, in occupied territories during the Great War. Intimidation masquerading as testimony. Your Majesty! Sarah's voice rang out clear and strong. She stepped forward, moving past Rowan and Garrett before they could stop her. I was there. I know what happened. The assembled packs went silent. Every eye turned to her, this albino Omega walking into the space between armies. Marcus's face went pale. Vivian's expression flickered for just a moment, revealing shock underneath control. Sarah walked until she stood beside Connor, close enough to touch. She looked at Marcus, this alpha who had taken so much from her and felt no fear, only clarity. I am Seraphina Whitlock, she announced, Omega of Blackridge Pack. I witnessed the crimes Marcus Blackridge committed. She turned to face Vivian. And I know who encouraged them. Vivian's face hardened. Careful, girl. You make accusations you cannot prove. I am not a girl, Sarah said. Her voice took on a quality that made every alpha in the field suddenly still, a natural frequency that bypassed conscious thought and struck directly at wolf instinct. I am the daughter of Magnus Whitlock. I am your sister, Vivian, and I survived despite everything you did to destroy me. The revelation hit like thunder. Warriors on both sides began murmuring, confusion and shock spreading through ranks. Vivian's carefully constructed mask cracked completely. Sister, Vivian hissed, you died 28 years ago. I survived, Sarah said simply. Despite you poisoning our father, despite you killing my mother, despite you leaving me to die in the forest, I am here to ensure everyone knows exactly what you are. Vivian took 3 quick steps forward, hand dropping to the knife at her belt. You think you can come here and destroy everything I built? You are nothing. Ooh. Connor moved between them, fast as striking snake. Back away. Vivian looked at him, at the Alpha King who stood between her and her target. This is family business. This is murder, Connor corrected, and attempted genocide. You killed my first mate because she carried Lunae Calstus blood. You tried to kill Sarah for the same reason. You orchestrated Marcus's crimes to eliminate bloodlines you saw as threat. That is not family business. That is treason. Prove it, Vivian spat. Connor gestured to Rowan, who stepped forward with a leather portfolio. Inside were documents, medical records, testimony gathered over days of investigation. He began reading aloud. Testimony from Blackridge Omegas who witnessed Marin's murder. Autopsy records from Queen Liana showing traces of shadowroot poison, a substance only the Ravencrest family knows how to produce. Birth records proving Sarah and Vivian share a father. Letters intercepted between Vivian and Marcus discussing elimination of problem bloodlines. Each piece of evidence landed like hammer blows. Warriors who had stood loyal to Vivian began shifting, doubt entering their expressions. Pack law was absolute. If their alpha had committed treason, their oath to her became void. Marcus, seeing everything collapsing, made his choice. He lunged forward, drawing his sword, aiming not for Connor, but for Sarah. The move was desperate, animal, the last resort of a cornered predator. Connor was faster. His sword cleared its sheath and intercepted Marcus's blade with a ring of steel that echoed across the valley. The 2 alphas stood locked, weapons crossed, faces inches apart. You made your choice, Connor said quietly. Now live with it. He shoved Marcus backward with strength that belied his age. Marcus stumbled, recovered, raised his sword for another strike. Connor waited, blade held in a ready stance, golden eyes cold and patient. The fight lasted less than a minute. Marcus was younger, stronger, more aggressive. Connor was older, but he had forgotten more about combat than Marcus would ever learn. Every strike Marcus made was met with perfect defense. Every opening Marcus left was exploited with surgical precision. Connor did not use excessive force. He did not need to. He simply waited until Marcus overextended, knocked the sword from his grip, and placed his blade at the younger alpha's throat. Yield, Connor commanded. Marcus, kneeling in grass with a sword at his throat, looked up at the king who had defeated him effortlessly. Then he looked past Connor to where Sarah stood watching. The hatred in his eyes was pure and complete. I yield, Marcus said. The words tasted like ash. Connor stepped back, lowering his weapon. Under Lex Regis, you are found guilty of murder and crimes against Omegas. Your punishment will be determined by the one you harmed most. He turned to Sarah. Luna Queen, he is yours to judge. Sarah walked forward slowly. Marcus watched her approach, his expression shifting from hatred to something that might have been fear. She stopped 3 paces away, looking down at him kneeling in the grass. You took everything from me, Sarah said quietly. My dignity, my safety, my friend. You tried to take my children and my life. You are a monster. Marcus flinched as if struck. But I am not you, Sarah continued. I will not kill. I will not torture. Instead, I give you something worse. She raised her voice so every warrior present could hear. You will live, stripped of alpha status, stripped of lands, stripped of every privilege you took for granted. You will serve in Omega work crews. You will clean. You will mend. You will spend every day seeing Omegas thrive under protection of law you tried to destroy. And every night you will remember that your own weakness, your own cruelty, brought you to this place. The sentence was worse than death for an alpha. Marcus's face crumpled, all arrogance fleeing. Please, he whispered. Please just kill me. No, Sarah said. You will live with what you did. Connor nodded to Declan, who moved forward with chains. Marcus was bound and hauled away, his own warriors watching in silence. Some looked relieved, others looked ashamed. None moved to defend him. That left Vivian. She stood alone now, her warriors having stepped back when the evidence came forward. Pack law was absolute. A proven traitor could not command loyalty. She looked at Sarah with pure venom. You ruined everything, Vivian said. Her voice shook with rage, barely contained. "I spent 28 years building the Ravencrest pack into a power. I made alliances. I crushed enemies. I created something from nothing. And you pathetic Omega, you take it all away." "I did not take it," Sarah said. "You threw it away the moment you chose murder over mercy." Vivienne's hand moved toward her knife. Connor's warriors tensed, weapons rising. But before anyone could act, Sarah spoke. Just one word, but it carried a frequency that bypassed conscious thought and struck directly at primal wolf instinct. "Stop!" Vivienne froze. Every warrior in the valley froze. The word had not been shouted. It had not been screamed. It had simply been spoken with absolute authority, and every alpha present felt compulsive need to obey. The silence stretched. Vivienne stood locked in place, hand on knife hilt, body trembling with effort to move. Finally, Sarah spoke again, normal voice returning. "I am Lunai Calstes," Sarah said. "The bloodline you tried to exterminate. My voice does not command through force. It commands through truth. And the truth is, you are broken, sister. You have been broken since the day you chose to murder rather than share." Vivienne's hand fell away from the knife. She looked at Sarah with something that might have been despair. "Why? Why did he love you more?" "He did not," Sarah said gently. "He loved us both, but you could not accept that love came in different forms." Vivienne sank to her knees. Guards moved forward, but Connor waved them back. He watched as Sarah approached her half-sister, this woman who had tried so hard to kill her. "You will face justice," Sarah said, "but not death. You will serve 20 years in Omega Sanctuary, caring for those you once hunted, learning what it means to protect instead of destroy. If you survive that with any humanity intact, we will speak again." Vivienne looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. "I hate you." "I know," Sarah said, "and I pity you." Guards took Vivienne away. The assembled packs watched in silence as both villains were removed. Justice served not through execution, but through transformation. It was unprecedented. It was merciful. It was strong in a way that violence could never be. Connor turned to face the combined packs, 400 warriors staring at him and his 50. Under Lex Regis, justice has been served. Marcus Blackridge and Vivienne Ravencrest have been judged and sentenced. Their crimes against Omegas, against pups, against the sacred laws that bind us all have been punished. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. From this day forward, any pack under Northern Territory's rule will adopt new Omega protection laws. Abuse will mean loss of status. Murder will mean loss of everything. We are wolves, but we are not animals. We are better than our worst impulses. We must be. The assembled warriors were silent. Then slowly, one of Marcus's own wolves stepped forward and knelt. The gesture was clear. Acceptance of Connor's authority. Acceptance of the new order. Within moments, others joined. First dozens, then scores, then all of them. 400 warriors kneeling before 50, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. Connor looked at Sarah, at this Omega who had faced her demons and chosen mercy over vengeance. She met his gaze and smiled, small and genuine. The mate bond sang between them, connection deepening into something that might have been love. The trial was over. The war was won without battle, and the Northern Territories would never be the same. They began the journey home the next day, Marcus and Vivienne transported under heavy guard, a delegation of Blackridge and Ravencrest wolves traveling with them to witness the sentencing and ensure their former leaders faced justice. The mood was strange, not victory celebration, but something quieter. Relief mixed with exhaustion, hope mixed with uncertainty. Sarah rode beside Connor this time, not in the supply wagon, but on her own mount, handling it well after instruction from Garrett. They traveled in comfortable silence, the inner circle surrounding them, 50 warriors who had witnessed something unprecedented and were still processing what it meant. On the second night, camped in the same valley where they had stopped on the way out, Connor found Sarah sitting alone again. This time when he sat beside her, she immediately leaned against him, comfortable with the contact, trusting in his presence. "You were magnificent today," Connor said. "I was terrified," Sarah admitted. "But I remembered what you said, about fear and courage living together. You chose truth over revenge. That is strength most warriors never achieve." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Do you think they will change? Marcus? Vivienne?" "I do not know," Connor said honestly. But you gave them the chance. That is more than they gave Marin, more than they gave you." She nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about the pups, about Ash and Kai and Raya and Gray and Tessa and Owen. They are safe because we did this, because we chose law over violence. They are safe because you refused to let them die," Connor said. "In the blizzard, in the trial. You are their mother in every way that matters." Sarah turned to look at him. "And you? What are you to them?" Connor thought about 6 tiny pups sleeping against his chest in a canvas tent while blizzard raged outside. Thought about naming them, thought about promising to protect them. "I am whatever they need me to be." "They need a father," Sarah said quietly. "Then I will be that." They sat together under stars that had watched them survive and triumph, 2 souls connected by mate bond and shared purpose, and knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The journey home would take days, but they were going home. To Iron Peak, to safety, to 6 pups who waited, to the beginning of something new built on the ashes of something old. The Northern Territories had bent toward justice today. Tomorrow, it would bend toward mercy. And the day after, toward hope. One choice at a time, one Omega protected at a time, one life saved at a time. It was enough, it had to be. The last stars faded as dawn approached, and with them, the last shadows of the past. Ahead lay only light, and the work of making that light permanent. The gates of Iron Peak opened like welcoming arms. Connor led the column home through streets lined with citizens who had waited 6 days for news. When they saw their Alpha King returning alive, when they saw the Luna Queen riding beside him unharmed, when they saw prisoners being transported under guard and no bodies carried in wagons, relief swept through the citadel like wind through autumn leaves. This had not been war. This had been justice. The difference mattered. Sarah dismounted in the courtyard and immediately ran toward the royal wing. Connor let her go, understanding that nothing mattered more to her than seeing 6 pups she had left behind. He watched her disappear through doorways, white hair streaming behind her, and felt something warm settle in his chest. This was what victory looked like. Not conquered territory or defeated enemies, but a mother running to her children. The inner circle began organizing the prisoners' transport to their designated locations. Marcus would be held in a work facility attached to the Citadel, where Omega supervisors would oversee his labor. Vivian would be escorted to the sanctuary 3 days' ride south, a place where traumatized Omegas received healing and protection. Both would face their sentences beginning immediately. Both would have years to contemplate what their choices had cost. Connor found Sarah in the nursery an hour later. She sat on the floor surrounded by 6 pups who climbed over her like she was a mountain to be conquered. The young wolves had grown noticeably in the week since their rescue, bodies responding to warmth and proper food with the rapid development natural to their kind in early life. Ash, the white pup, had buried his face in her neck and was making small, contented sounds. Kai and Raya, the black twins, wrestled for position in her lap. Gray sat beside her shoulder like a small guardian. Tessa bounced with excitement, unable to stay still. Owen, with his clubbed paw, simply leaned against her side and closed his eyes. The 6 elderly warriors who served as nurses stood back, giving family space to reunite. Alara caught Connor's eye and nodded once. They had kept their promise. Not one pup harmed, not one moment of fear. Connor nodded back, gratitude beyond words passing between veterans who understood the weight of oaths. "They are bigger," Sarah said without looking up. Her voice was thick with emotion. "In just 6 days they grew so much." "Wolf pups age quickly in their first year," Connor said, recalling what Rowan had explained during their journey. He knelt beside the pile of children and Omega, adding his bulk to the equation. Their bodies mature rapidly to ensure survival. By their first birthday, they will seem closer to 3 or 4 in human years. Owen immediately crawled onto his leg, claiming space with the confidence of a child who knew he was safe. "Did you win?" Gray asked. His voice was high and clear, the first words Connor had heard him speak. "Did you beat the bad wolf?" Connor met the pup's serious gaze. "We did not beat him. We made him face what he did wrong. That is more important than winning." Gray considered this with the gravity of someone much older. "Good. Mama says hitting is for when nothing else works." "Your mama is wise," Connor said. He looked at Sarah, at her face wet with tears she was not bothering to hide. "Are you well?" "I am home," Sarah said simply. "That is all that matters." They sat together in the nursery while afternoon light slanted through windows and painted everything gold. 6 pups slowly exhausted themselves and fell asleep in a pile of limbs and fur. Connor carried them one by one to their nest of blankets, settling each with care. Sarah watched him, this warrior king handling children with the gentleness of someone who understood how precious and fragile life could be. That night, Connor called his inner circle to a meeting that was not about war or strategy. They gathered in his private study, a room lined with books and maps and memories. 5 men who had followed him through 8 decades sat in comfortable chairs, accepting cups of warm mead, looking at each other with the easy familiarity of brothers. "We need to talk about what comes next," Connor said. He stood by the window, looking out over his citadel. "Marcus and Vivian are sentenced. Their territories need new leadership. The Omega protection laws need to be implemented across all packs, and I need to know that when I am gone, this work continues." Declan set down his cup. "When you are gone is decades away." "I am 67 years old," Connor said. He turned to face them. "My father died at 75. My grandfather at 72. You are all between 58 and 70. We are not young anymore. We need to start building the structure that outlasts us." Finn leaned forward, his tactical mind already working. "You want to create a council. Representatives from each pack territory, including Omega representation. Something that can enforce the new laws without requiring the Alpha King to personally intervene in every dispute." "Exactly," Connor said. "And I want you 5 to build it." He looked at each man in turn. "Declan, you understand governance and chain of command. Finn, you understand systems and logistics. Rowan, you understand healing and protection. Thorin, you understand information gathering and communication. Garrett, you understand discipline and training. Together you can create something that serves all wolves, not just alphas." "What about you?" Garrett asked. "Where do you fit in this vision?" Connor smiled, and it was not a sad expression. "I fit in as the old warrior who finally gets to rest. I have fought my wars. I have done my duty. Now I want to spend whatever time I have left watching 6 pups grow up and learning what it means to have a family again." The inner circle was quiet. Then Rowan spoke, his healer's voice gentle. "You have earned that rest, brother. We all have. But building this council will take years. We can do it together, all of us." "To new wars," Declan said, raising his cup, the kind fought with words instead of steel. The others raised their cups in response. To new wars. They drank, these 5 men and their king, and began planning a future where justice did not require personal intervention of the powerful, where protection was systematic rather than dependent on individual mercy. They worked late into the night, drawing up structures and procedures and checks and balances. By dawn, they had the skeleton of something unprecedented. A council of alphas, betas, and omegas with equal voice in pack law. It would take time to implement. It would face resistance. But it would be built. The first 3 months passed in controlled urgency. Connor and the inner circle worked dawn to dusk establishing the Omega Council framework. Sarah proved invaluable, her experience of abuse giving her insight into what protections were truly needed versus what looked good on paper. Together, they drafted comprehensive laws that addressed not just physical violence but psychological manipulation, economic control, and systemic discrimination that had persisted for generations. The Citadel's Great Hall was transformed into a meeting chamber. Long tables were installed in a circle so no seat held dominance over others. Messengers rode to every pack territory with invitations for Omega representatives to attend the founding assembly. The response was mixed. Some territories sent delegates immediately, eager for change. Others resisted, alphas viewing Omega representation as threat to traditional hierarchy. Connor sent personal letters to resistant alphas, reminding them that the alternative to voluntary participation was mandatory compliance enforced by the king's law. Sarah worked directly with arriving Omega delegates, many of whom had never been inside a ruling citadel, let alone invited to speak in governance. She spent hours listening to their stories, documenting patterns of abuse, identifying systemic failures that enabled cruelty. One Omega from the Southern Territories, a female named Elena who had lost 3 pups to an alpha's rage, broke down crying when Sarah asked her opinion on proposed shelter policies. No one had ever asked her opinion before. "Your voice matters," Sarah told her gently. "Every Omega here has voice. We are building something new, but we cannot build it without your wisdom." The founding assembly took place on a spring morning 6 months after the trial. 50 Omega representatives sat at those circular tables alongside 20 Alpha leaders and 15 Beta advisors. Connor opened the session not with demands or decrees, but with acknowledgement. He spoke of his own failures, of Omegas who had suffered in his territories because he had not looked closely enough, had not listened carefully enough. He spoke of Marin, of Sarah, of countless unnamed wolves who had been harmed by systems that prioritized power over protection. "We are here to change that," Connor said, "not because I command it, though I do command it, but because it is right. Because our strength as wolves lies not in dominating the vulnerable, but in protecting them." He looked directly at the Omega representatives. "You are not here to ask for mercy. You are here to demand justice, and we are here to provide it." The assembly lasted 3 days. Debates were heated, particularly around enforcement mechanisms and penalties for violations. Some alphas argued that existing pack law was sufficient if properly enforced. Omega delegates countered that pack law had been written by alphas for alphas, with no consideration for those it oppressed. Sarah mediated countless disputes, her natural voice frequency helping calm tensions when arguments threatened to devolve into violence. On the 3rd day, they voted. The Omega Protection Act passed with 72 votes in favor, 13 opposed. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. The new laws would take effect immediately across all Northern Territories. Every pack would establish local Omega advocacy positions. Physical abuse would result in loss of rank and mandatory service. Repeated violations would mean permanent exile. Most controversially, Omegas gained legal right to refuse mate bonds with alphas they did not choose, overturning centuries of arranged pairings based on political advantage. Connor signed the act into law with his seal and blood, the traditional method for decrees intended to be permanent. As he pressed his signet ring into hot wax, he looked at Sarah and saw tears streaming down her face. Not grief, not fear, hope, pure and radiant and hard-won. "It is done," Connor said quietly. "Now comes the harder part, making it real." The work of implementation consumed the following months. Connor and the Inner Circle traveled to resistant territories, personally overseeing establishment of new systems. They encountered hostility, particularly from older alphas who viewed change as weakness. One ancient alpha named Thaddeus tried to refuse the laws outright, claiming King's authority did not extend to internal pack matters. Connor arrived at his territory with 50 warriors and a copy of the Omega Protection Act. "The law is clear," Connor said. His voice carried the weight of 8 decades commanding armies. "You comply or you forfeit your territory. Choose now." Thaddeus chose compliance. Word spread quickly that resistance meant consequences. Within a year, every territory had established required structures. The changes were not perfect. Implementation varied widely based on local leadership, but foundations were laid, and foundations could be built upon. Connor watched 6 young wolves grow during this transformation. By age 5, thanks to the accelerated development natural to wolf pups in their early years, they had the physical maturity and capabilities of wolves twice their age. Their bodies raced to prepare them for survival, metabolism burning hot, minds absorbing information at rates that would slow after their 10th year. It was the way of their species, ensuring young could contribute to pack survival as quickly as possible. Ash, the white pup, was quiet and observant. He spent hours in the infirmary with Rowan, learning about herbs and treatments, asking questions with relentless curiosity. The healer recognized in him something rare, not just aptitude for medicine, but genuine calling. Ash seemed to understand instinctively what others needed before they spoke it. He would sit with injured warriors, small hand resting on scarred arms, and somehow pain would lessen. Rowan taught him to recognize plants, mix medicines, stitch wounds with thread finer than spider silk. By age 5, Ash could diagnose common ailments and recommend treatments. By age 7, he was assisting in surgeries. Connor found them one morning in the infirmary, Ash carefully wrapping an elderly wolf's injured leg while Rowan supervised. The young wolf's white fur was pristine, his movements precise and gentle. When he finished, the elderly wolf thanked him with genuine warmth. Ash simply nodded, already moving to the next patient, a young warrior with a training injury. "He has gift," Rowan said quietly to Connor. "Not just skill. Gift. The kind that comes once in a generation." "He has your patience," Connor observed, "and Sarah's compassion." "Then he will be better healer than I ever was," Rowan said, and there was no jealousy in his voice, only satisfaction at finding worthy successor. Kai and Raya, the Black twins, were inseparable. They moved through the citadel like paired dancers, finishing each other's sentences, communicating in glances and subtle gestures that only twins could interpret. Finn had recognized their potential early and began teaching them about trade routes, pack politics, the complex web of alliances that held territories together. The twins absorbed everything with frightening speed, their shared consciousness allowing them to process information twice as fast as single wolves. By age 6, they were sitting in on diplomatic meetings, observing how Finn negotiated treaties and resolved disputes. By age 8, they were offering suggestions that the veteran tactician actually implemented. Their ability to see multiple perspectives simultaneously, to understand motivations from both sides of any conflict, made them natural diplomats. Connor watched them mediate a territorial dispute between two minor packs and saw the future of Northern Territory's governance, not dominated by a single strong leader, but guided by those who could build bridges instead of walls. Gray, silver-furred and serious beyond his years, shadowed Connor constantly. The young wolf had appointed himself student of kingship, studying how Connor made decisions, asking penetrating questions about why certain paths were chosen over others. Unlike typical alpha pups, who craved power for its own sake, Gray seemed to understand that leadership was burden as much as privilege. "Why do you always listen before speaking?" Gray asked one day as they walked the battlements together. The young wolf was now tall enough to see over the walls, his body having shot up during growth spurts that left him gangly and still adjusting to longer limbs. "Because speaking is easy," Connor said. "Any fool can command. But listening requires humility, requires acknowledging that you might be wrong, that others might have wisdom you lack." He paused, looking out over his territories. "I have made many mistakes in my life, Gray. The worst ones came from speaking when I should have listened." "What was your worst mistake?" Gray asked. "Not asking Liana how she felt about having a child," Connor said quietly. "I assumed she wanted what I wanted. When she died, I realized I had never actually asked. I had simply decided for both of us." He looked at the young wolf. "Never make that mistake. Always ask. Always listen. Leadership is service, not domination." Gray absorbed this in silence, filing it away with the hundreds of other lessons Connor gave him through example and explanation. The young wolf was building a framework for rulership that prioritized others over self, duty over glory, protection over conquest. It was the kind of leadership that could last generations if properly maintained. Tessa, Marin's daughter, was perpetual motion. She bounced through life with energy that exhausted everyone around her. But beneath the rambunctious exterior was fierce determination and absolute fearlessness. Garrett recognized warrior potential immediately and began training her, teaching combat forms and weapon handling. But he taught her something more important. He taught her that true warriors protected rather than conquered. "Why do we train?" Garrett asked during one of their morning sessions. They stood in the practice yard, wooden swords in hand, breath misting in cold air. "To fight," Tessa answered confidently. She was 9 years old, compact and quick, already showing promise of formidable fighter. "No," Garrett said. He tapped her wooden blade with his. "We train so we do not have to fight. Every battle you avoid through preparedness is victory. Every enemy you deter through reputation is life saved." He demonstrated a defensive stance. Real warriors build peace through strength. Anyone can destroy. It takes true skill to protect. Tessa practiced the defensive form, her boundless energy channeled into precise movements. She was learning that discipline was not restriction, but foundation. That training was not about learning to hurt, but learning to prevent hurt. By age 10, she could defeat warriors twice her age in sparring matches, not through aggression, but through perfect defense that exhausted opponents and forced surrender without injury. Owen, the young wolf with clubbed paw, surprised everyone by discovering the Citadel Gardens. His physical limitation forced him to adapt, to think rather than rely on speed or strength. He moved carefully, deliberately, learning to compensate for imperfect limb through patience and planning. The elderly gardener who tended the royal grounds, a male named Thomas, who had lost his leg in the Great War, recognized kindred spirit. "Plants do not care if your paw is perfect," Thomas told Owen during their first meeting. "They care only that you tend them with attention and respect. You have those qualities. Come, I will teach you their names." Owen absorbed gardening knowledge like desert absorbing rain. He learned which herbs healed and which harmed, which flowers attracted pollinators and which repelled pests, which trees provided shade and which provided fruit. But more than that, he learned patience. Gardens could not be rushed. Seeds grew in their own time according to their nature. By age 8, Owen was creating garden designs that balanced beauty with function, planning sections years in advance based on mature growth patterns. Connor found him one afternoon kneeling among roses, carefully pruning deadwood while speaking quietly to plants. "What are you telling them?" Connor asked. "That they are doing well," Owen replied without looking up. "That I appreciate their blooms. Mama says words matter even when you think no one is listening. Plants might not understand words, but they understand attention." "Your mama is correct," Connor said. He knelt beside Owen, joints protesting the movement. His age was beginning to show, 67, becoming 68, becoming 69. Small pains accumulated. Mornings took longer to start. Evenings arrived sooner. "Will you show me what you are planting?" Owen led him through the gardens, pointing out sections designated for medicinal herbs, food plants, memorial flowers. He explained companion planting, soil rotation, water management with vocabulary far beyond his years. Connor listened, amazed at how this young wolf had taken what many viewed as disability and transformed it into unique strength. "You have found your calling," Connor said. "Just as Ash found healing, you have found growth. That is gift." "I like making things live," Owen said simply. "It is easier than fighting." "The wisest warriors understand that," Connor replied. "That preserving life is harder and more important than taking it." Connor's relationship with Sarah deepened during these years of building. They fell into comfortable partnership, splitting responsibilities naturally. She managed Omega advocacy and social programs. He handled military matters and territorial disputes. They met every evening to share what they had learned, what problems they had encountered, what solutions they were considering. It was not the passionate romance of young wolves discovering first love. It was something quieter and perhaps stronger. It was partnership built on respect and shared purpose. One night, 3 years after the trial, they sat together in their chambers with fire burning low. Connor was reviewing reports, squinting at text that seemed harder to read each year. Sarah was working on proposal for Omega education programs, her elegant handwriting filling pages with detailed plans. "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Mating with me, taking on 6 pups who are not yours by blood, spending your final years managing politics instead of resting." Connor set down his reports and looked at her. "Every day for the past 50 years, I regretted that I lived when others died, that I survived wars that took better men, that I could not save Liana or our son." He moved to sit beside her. "Then I found you and 6 pups in a blizzard, and suddenly I stopped regretting, started hoping again. So no, I do not regret. I am grateful." "Even though you are old and tired and your eyes hurt reading?" "Especially because of that," Connor said. He took her hand. "It means I am still here, still useful, still learning. I have fought many battles, Sarah, saved many lives. But nothing I did in those wars matters as much as what we are building now. Laws that protect, systems that endure, children growing into their best selves. That is legacy worth having." "You are not what I expected alphas to be," Sarah said. "When I was young, I thought all alphas were like Marcus, cruel and small and weak. Then I met you and learned that strength can be gentle, that power can serve, that leadership can be about others instead of self. I am only what 80 years of war made me," Connor said. "A man who has seen enough death to value life, who has commanded enough to understand that true authority comes from those who choose to follow, not those forced to obey." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 souls who had survived separate hells and found peace in shared purpose. Outside their window, Iron Peak slept under stars that watched and judged nothing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new disputes to mediate, new systems to refine. but tonight they simply sat together, and that was enough. Marin's memorial was completed in the spring of their 4th year. Sarah had designed it with input from the 6 young wolves, all of whom contributed ideas based on their growing skills. Ash suggested medicinal plantings around the base. Kai and Raya researched memorial traditions across territories and incorporated elements from multiple cultures. Gray helped select the stone, massive granite from quarries north of Iron Peak. Tessa learned masonry basics to help set the foundation. Owen designed the surrounding gardens, planting rose varieties that would bloom in succession throughout growing season. The marker stood in a quiet corner of the Citadel Gardens, warm gray stone carved with Marin's name and dates. Below her name, words Sarah had chosen. She gave everything to protect innocent lives. We remember, we honor, we continue her work. The dedication ceremony was held on a bright morning, with wind carrying scent of flowers and new grass. The 6 young wolves stood before the memorial, in order from oldest to youngest. Gray, now 10 years old, carried the physical presence of a teenager, thanks to accelerated development, though his serious demeanor made him seem older still. He spoke first. "Marin, you were my birth mother, but I never knew you," Gray said. His voice was clear and strong. "Mama Sarah tells me you were brave, that you stood up for what was right even when it cost everything. I promise to rule with that same courage when my time comes. I will remember that leadership is protecting the vulnerable, not exploiting them. Thank you for giving me life. Thank you for teaching me through your sacrifice what kind of wolf I want to be." Tessa stepped forward next, her compact frame radiating energy even in solemn moment. "I wish I could have known you. Mama says you made sure we were warm and fed even when you had nothing, that you sang to us when we cried. She says you would have been proud of who we are becoming. I am training to be warrior, not the kind who seeks glory, but the kind who stands between the innocent and those who would harm them. Like you did, like Mama Sarah does. I will make you proud." Owen moved forward, his limp barely noticeable now after years of adaptation. "You gave me life knowing I was not perfect. You protected me when others would have let me die. I have learned that imperfection is not weakness, that different abilities require different strengths. I grow things now. I make beauty from earth. I make medicine from plants. I make life where there was stone. That is how I honor you, by nurturing instead of destroying." Kai and Raya stepped forward together as always, speaking in unison the way twins did when emotions ran deep. "We never knew you, but we carry pieces of your courage. Mama rescued us along with your children, raised us all as one family, taught us that blood is less important than choice, that family is built through sacrifice and love. We promised to build bridges between territories, to negotiate peace where others would choose war, to remember that every wolf deserves voice and dignity. That is your legacy continuing." Finally, Ash stepped forward, white fur catching sunlight and glowing like captured frost. His voice was softer than his siblings, but it carried weight. "I am healer because of you, because I saw how Mama Sarah and Connor responded to death, not with violence, but with commitment to prevent future deaths. I study medicine so others do not lose mothers the way we lost you, so children do not grow up without the protection you tried to give. Every life I save is honoring your sacrifice." Sarah knelt and placed her hand on the warm stone. She spoke quietly, words meant for friend who could no longer hear, but perhaps could feel. "I kept them safe, Marin. I promised I would, and I did. They are thriving. They are loved. Your children know who you were. They know what you gave, and they will carry your strength forward." She paused, tears streaming down her face. "I wish you could see them. I wish you could know them. But I will tell them stories of you until they teach their children, and your memory will live as long as wolves remember that protecting innocence is worth any cost." Connor stood behind her, placing his hand on her shoulder. The 6 young wolves clustered around, forming circle of family bound not by blood, but by shared survival and mutual choice. The inner circle stood at respectful distance, 5 old warriors who had fought for this peace, who understood that the memorial honored more than one fallen wolf. It honored all those who had suffered under old systems, all those who had been harmed by wolves who viewed power as permission. "This is what we fought for," Connor said quietly. "This moment, this peace, this remembrance, these children growing into their best selves. The wind moved through roses Owen had planted, carrying petals across grass, and somewhere in that movement was acknowledgement. Marin was gone, but her legacy breathed in 6 young wolves who grew stronger every day, in laws that protected omegas across all territories, in memorial that ensured her sacrifice would never be forgotten. Years passed with the quiet speed of water-wearing stone. The 6 young wolves grew through their accelerated development phase, bodies maturing rapidly until their 10th year, when growth began to slow and match normal wolf aging. By age 10, they had the physical presence and maturity of wolves in their early 20s, though technically they were still children by calendar count. This was normal, even desirable. It meant they could contribute meaningfully to pack survival, could take on responsibilities that would seem impossible for human children of equivalent age. Ash at 10 became Rowan's official apprentice in title as well as practice. He worked 12-hour days in the infirmary, treating everything from combat injuries to childhood illnesses to birthing complications. His white fur was constantly stained with blood and herbs, his hands steady even when exhaustion made them tremble. Rowan watched him work with pride bordering on awe. "You are a better healer at 10 than I was at 30, Rowan told him one evening after particularly difficult surgery. They had saved a warrior who had taken sword through lung, outcome that should have been death but became survival through their combined skill. "You taught me everything," Ash protested. His voice was modest, but his eyes reflected quiet confidence in his abilities. "I taught you technique," Rowan corrected. "But compassion cannot be taught. Either it is part of your soul or it is not. You have it in abundance." He placed hand on Ash's shoulder. "When I am gone, the Northern Territories will be in good hands." Kai and Rhea at 10 were traveling regularly as diplomatic envoys, resolving disputes that would have once required Connor's personal intervention. Their reputation for fairness and insight spread quickly. Pax began requesting the twins specifically for mediation, trusting that twin perspective would find solutions others missed. They brokered water rights agreement that prevented war between Southern territories. They negotiated trade deal that brought prosperity to previously isolated mountain packs. They did it all with grace and humor that made even resistant wolves warm to them. Connor sat in on one of their negotiations, watching them work together like choreographed dancers. One twin would present logical argument while other tracked emotional responses. They would switch roles seamlessly, adapting approach in real time based on what they perceived. By session's end, both parties had agreed to compromise neither thought possible going in. Connor saw future of Northern Territories in those 2 young wolves, not ruled by strength alone, but guided by wisdom and empathy. Gray at 10 was spending every waking moment learning to rule. He sat in council meetings taking detailed notes. He accompanied Connor on territory inspections, observing how problems were addressed and compromises reached. He studied law and history and military strategy, building comprehensive understanding of what kingship actually required. But his education was not limited to books and observations. Connor deliberately gave him real responsibilities with real consequences. "You will handle the Northern timber dispute," Connor told him when Gray was 11. The young wolf's silver fur had darkened slightly with age, his serious demeanor now reinforced by physical maturity that commanded respect. 2 packs claim same forest. Both have legitimate historical precedent. You will hear both sides, research the facts, and render judgment. I will review your decision, but it will be yours to make. Gray spent 2 weeks on the dispute, interviewing pack members, reviewing old treaties, walking the disputed territory himself. His final judgment split the forest, but required both packs to establish joint management committee. It was solution neither pack had considered, and both accepted it reluctantly. But it worked. Within a year, the joint committee was functioning smoothly, demonstrating that shared responsibility could succeed where divided ownership had failed. "You did well," Connor told Gray when reviewing the outcome. "Not perfect, but thoughtful and fair. That is what matters." "What would you have done differently?" Gray asked, always seeking improvement. "Nothing," Connor said honestly. "Your solution was better than mine would have been. I would have simply dictated division. You built cooperation. That is superior leadership." Tessa at 10 was patrol leader, commanding warriors twice her age through combination of skill and absolute fearlessness. She had completed advanced combat training with Garrett, mastering every weapon in the Citadel's arsenal. But more importantly, she had internalized philosophy of protection over aggression. Her patrols never initiated conflict, always seeking to de-escalate tensions before violence erupted. Yet when violence was unavoidable, her warriors followed her without hesitation because they trusted her judgment and her commitment to bringing everyone home alive. Connor observed one of her patrols when Tessa was 12, watching her command 20 seasoned warriors with calm authority. They encountered bandits attacking merchant caravan, situation that could have become bloody battle. Tessa assessed quickly, deployed her warriors in defensive formation protecting merchants, then offered bandits choice: leave peacefully or face trained soldiers. The bandits, seeing disciplined force and leadership that would not hesitate to defend innocents, chose to retreat. Not one drop of blood spilled, Connor noted afterward. That is skill. Garrett taught me that winning without fighting is best victory, Tessa replied. Her compact frame was now lean muscle, body honed by endless training. But I would have fought if necessary. They threatened innocence. That is line that cannot be crossed. Owen at 10 was working full-time in the Citadel Gardens, having taken over as head gardener when old Thomas retired. The elderly veteran had trained him thoroughly, passing on 60 years of knowledge about plant care and landscape design. Owen transformed the gardens into something approaching art, creating spaces that served multiple purposes. Medicinal herbs grew alongside food plants. Memorial sections honored fallen warriors with plantings that reflected their personalities. Quiet corners provided retreat for those dealing with trauma or grief. But Owen's greatest contribution was teaching. He held classes for anyone interested in growing things, from pups learning basic gardening, to warriors seeking post-military careers, to omegas wanting to contribute to Citadel food production. His patient instruction and willingness to adapt teaching methods for different learning styles made him beloved across all ranks. Connor found him one day teaching a group of young pups about companion planting, explaining complex ecological concepts in terms they could understand. Plants are like packs, Owen was saying. Some grow better together, helping each other thrive. Others compete, taking resources the other needs. Good gardening is understanding which plants are friends and which are rivals. Just like good leadership is understanding which wolves work well together. That is wisdom, Connor said after the class ended. You teach more than gardening. I teach life, Owen replied simply. How to nurture, how to be patient, how to accept that not everything grows the way you expect, but that does not make it less valuable. He looked at his clubbed paw. I was not what anyone expected, but I grew into something useful. That is what I want every pup to know. Unexpected is not defective. Connor felt something profound in that moment. This young wolf with imperfect paw had achieved wisdom that some never found in lifetimes. He understood that true strength was not absence of limitation, but ability to build around limitations until they became irrelevant or even advantages. Connor's relationship with Sarah matured into something that felt eternal, despite knowledge that mortality loomed. They had been together 7 years, and in that time Sarah had transformed from terrified victim into confident queen. She ran the Omega Council with authority that commanded respect across territories. She drafted policies that other territories adopted as models. She mediated disputes between Omega advocates and resistant alphas, finding compromises that addressed legitimate concerns while maintaining core protections. But she also remained partner who listened when Connor needed to process difficult decisions, who held him when nightmares of 500 dead soldiers still occasionally woke him, who reminded him that leadership was not about being perfect, but about trying every day to be better. They fell into rhythms that married couples develop, finishing each other's sentences, knowing moods at a glance, supporting without needing to be asked. One evening in their 10th year together, Connor was walking battlements alone. He moved slower now, 77 years old and feeling every year. Gray had fully conquered his hair. Wrinkles carved deep lines around eyes and mouth. His hands showed prominent veins and age spots. He needed walking stick for longer distances, joints no longer tolerating extended standing or walking. Old injuries from decades past made themselves known through aches that never quite faded. He was old. This was undeniable fact. Sarah found him there, watching sunset paint mountains in gold and crimson. She stood beside him silently for a long moment before speaking. "What are you thinking about?" "Time," Connor said. "How it moves faster the less you have left. My father died at 75. I have already outlived him by 2 years. Every sunrise feels like borrowed gift." "Are you afraid?" Sarah asked. "Not of dying," Connor said. "I have seen too much death to fear it. But I am afraid of leaving you, of not seeing how the story ends, of missing grandchildren who have not been born yet." He looked at her. "I am afraid I have not done enough." "You have done everything," Sarah said firmly. "You changed laws that had stood for centuries. You protected those everyone else ignored. You raised 6 wolves who will continue your work. You gave me life worth living when I thought my only choice was surviving until death. What more could anyone ask?" "I want more time," Connor admitted quietly. "I want to see Gray's coronation, want to watch Ash become fully trained healer, want to know Kai and Raya succeed in preventing wars, want to see Tessa command her own unit, want to walk through Owen's gardens in seasons I will not live to see." "Then we make every day count," Sarah said. She took his arm, supporting him in practical way that acknowledged his limitations without pitying them. "We make every moment matter. We do not waste time on regrets or fears. We simply live until we cannot anymore." "That is wisdom," Connor said. "When did you become so wise?" "When I survived what should have killed me," Sarah replied. "When I learned that life is not measured in years but in moments that give meaning to years. We have had good moments, Connor. We will have more. And when you are gone, I will carry those moments until I join you." They stood together watching stars emerge, 2 souls who had found each other late and would separate too soon, making peace with mortality the only way possible, by accepting it while refusing to let it diminish the time remaining. 10 years after the trial, Marcus Blackridge encountered Owen in the Citadel Gardens. Marcus was 55 years old now, body worn by a decade of manual labor and waste management crews. His hair had gone gray, his muscles, once impressive, had softened. His eyes, once hard with cruelty, now carried something different. Not redemption, not absolution, but understanding of what he had lost and why. He had been transferring compost when he heard gentle voice speaking to plants. He looked up and saw a young wolf with clubbed paw carefully pruning roses, white marking on his chest, identifying him as one of the 6. Marcus stood frozen, tools forgotten, as 10 years of suppressed guilt crashed over him like wave. This was Owen, the pup he had condemned to death for imperfect limb. Who should have been left in snow to freeze because Marcus believed weakness was unforgivable? Who had survived despite Marcus's cruelty and grown into something beautiful, something useful, something Marcus would never be? Marcus sank to his knees in dirt, tools falling from nerveless fingers. He began to weep, great shuddering sobs that came from place deeper than shame. He wept for Marin, for the love he had destroyed because he was too small and afraid to accept it. He wept for 3 pups he had condemned. He wept for Sarah, for violence he had inflicted because he believed power meant he could. He wept for 10 years spent understanding exactly what he had lost and why he could never get it back. Owen looked up at sound of crying. He saw Marcus, recognized him from descriptions, though they had never spoken. For a long moment they simply looked at each other across rows of roses. Then Owen stood carefully, wiping dirt from his paws, and walked over. "Are you all right?" Owen asked. His voice held concern, not hatred. Marcus stared at this impossible compassion. "You should hate me. I tried to kill you. When you were newborn, because your paw was not perfect." "I know," Owen said simply. "Mama Sarah told me everything. About you, about Marin, about how you chose cruelty over love." "I destroyed everything good I had," Marcus whispered, "because I was afraid. Afraid of appearing weak, afraid of being judged, afraid that imperfection in my pups reflected imperfection in me." "It did," Owen said. "Not their imperfection. Your fear. That was the weakness you were trying to hide." He knelt down to Marcus's level. "I spent my whole life compensating for this paw, learning to move differently, to think instead of relying on speed or strength. And I learned that what you called weakness made me different. Different is not defective. Different is just different. You could never understand that because you were too afraid to face your own imperfections." Marcus looked at this young wolf, at the wisdom that should have taken lifetimes to develop, and felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness. He did not deserve that and would not ask for it. but understanding. Finally, after 10 years of punishment, understanding of exactly what he had thrown away. "I cannot take back what I did," Marcus said. "Cannot undo the harm, cannot return Marin or give you the childhood you should have had." "No," Owen agreed. "You cannot. But you can tend the present. That is what my mama says. Every day is seed. You choose what you grow." He stood, returning to his roses. "You have spent 10 years in punishment. Maybe spend the next 10 building something instead of destroying. That will not erase your crimes, but it might give meaning to your survival." Owen went back to his pruning, speaking quietly to plants, leaving Marcus kneeling in dirt with tools scattered around him and revelation settling in. The young wolf did not forgive, did not absolve, did not even show particular kindness beyond basic concern for suffering being. But he showed something more valuable. He showed that transformation was possible for those willing to face what they had done and choose differently going forward. Marcus picked up his tools slowly, returned to his work transferring compost, enriching soil that would grow flowers and food. It was humble work, necessary work, work that built rather than destroyed. He had 10 more years before his sentence ended. Maybe, if he learned what Owen had just taught him, those 10 years could mean something beyond punishment, could mean actual change, however small, however late. Vivian Ravencrest's journey was harder. The Omega Sanctuary was run by wolves who had survived what she had inflicted. The director, a female named Sarah, who had lost mate and pups to Vivian's political machinations, assigned her worst jobs without apology. Cleaning blood from medical rooms after trauma surgeries, sitting with Omegas who woke screaming from nightmares of abuse Vivian had enabled, listening to stories of torture that she had either caused directly or permitted through calculated indifference. For first 5 years, Vivian tried to hold on to her arrogance, tried to maintain certainty that she had been right, that power was worth any cost, that Omegas were lesser wolves who deserved their suffering. But working among broken slowly cracked her defenses. It was not any single moment. It was accumulation of hundreds of moments. Young Omega flinching from her hand when she reached to help. Elderly female who could not speak without stammering from trauma. Mother who had lost pups to exposure during winter when no alpha would shelter her. Child who drew pictures of monsters that wore alpha faces. Each one chipped away at carefully constructed justifications until nothing remained but truth. She had hurt people, deliberately, systematically, for power that ultimately meant nothing. By year 7, Vivienne stopped fighting, stopped justifying, stopped defending. She simply worked, helping where she could, learning skills she had never bothered to acquire. Healing was slow work requiring patience and gentleness and ability to sit with pain without trying to fix it immediately. She learned it poorly, natural inclinations toward control and dominance fighting against necessary surrender to others' processes. But she learned. One evening in year 9, Vivian was sitting with Omega, who had been assaulted by her mate. The female was young, barely 20, named Rachel. She sat curled in chair, arms wrapped around knees, eyes vacant with trauma too fresh to process. Vivian had learned not to speak in these moments, not to offer empty comfort or false hope, just to be present, to bear witness, to silently communicate that victim was not alone. "Why do you stay?" Rachel asked suddenly. Her voice was small, rusty from disuse. "You are alpha. You could leave. Fight your way out. Why stay here with us?" "Because I deserve to be here," Vivian said. She was 47 years old now, hair showing gray, face lined with years of labor and stress. "Because I am one of the reasons wolves like you suffer. I built systems that enabled abuse, removed protections that prevented violence, all for power that meant nothing." "Do you regret it?" Rachel asked. "Every day," Vivian said. "Every single day I wake and see faces of wolves I hurt, wolves whose pups I took, whose mates I destroyed, whose lives I ruined for political advantage. That is my punishment. That will always be my punishment." Rachel was quiet for a moment, then, "Do you think people can change? Really change? Not just pretend, but actually become different?" "I do not know," Vivian admitted. "I am trying. But I do not know if trying is enough to undo what I did. I do not know if change is real or just better performance of pretending to care." "Trying matters," Rachel said softly. "My mate never tried, never questioned whether hurting me was wrong, just did it because he could. You question. That is different. That might be beginning of change." The conversation stayed with Vivian for days afterward. She began examining her own transformation more critically. Was she actually different, or had she simply learned to perform expected behaviors? She honestly did not know. But she kept trying, kept working, kept sitting with broken wolves and bearing witness to suffering she had caused or enabled. Year 10 arrived like marker on long road. Sarah came to visit on anniversary of sentencing. They met in small room with windows overlooking gardens Vivian had helped plant. Sarah entered alone, declining guards' offer to remain. She sat across from her half-sister, and for a long moment neither spoke. "You came," Vivian said finally. Her voice was different, softer, sharp edges worn away. "I said I would," Sarah replied. "I did not believe you. I keep my promises." Silence stretched. Vivian looked at her hands, work-worn and scarred from decade of labor she had once considered beneath her. "I want to say I am sorry. Want to say I understand now what I did. But words are insufficient." "Words are beginning," Sarah said. "Actions over time prove their truth." "Every day I wake and see faces of wolves I hurt," Vivian said. "Wolves whose pups I took, whose mates I destroyed, whose lives I ruined for power and pride. That is my punishment. That will always be my punishment." "Is that enough?" Sarah asked. Question was genuine, not rhetorical. "It has to be," Vivian said, "because I cannot undo what I did. I can only try to do better with whatever time remains." Sarah studied her sister, looking for deception and finding only weariness. "You have 10 more years here. Then you will have choice. Remain at Sanctuary as paid worker, helping others heal, or accept permanent exile, leaving Northern Territories forever. You will not return to power. That path is closed." "I understand," Vivian said. She paused, then spoke words that cost everything. "I do not know if this matters, but I want you to know. I was wrong about everything. Our father loved you not because you were special, but because you were his daughter. I could not see that through my jealousy. I destroyed our family for power I did not need. That is my truth." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes but did not let them fall. "It matters. Someday, perhaps, it will matter more. For now, it is enough to know you understand what you lost." "How are they?" Vivian asked quietly. "The young wolves?" "They are becoming adults," Sarah said, unable to keep pride from voice. "Ash will be chief healer. Kai and Raya work on diplomatic missions. Gray is learning to lead. Tessa fights to protect. Owen grows beauty from earth. They are everything their mothers hoped they would be." Vivian closed her eyes. Maren would be proud. "She would," Sarah agreed, "and so am I." They sat together while longer, two sisters separated by choices and bound by blood, finding not reconciliation, but acknowledgement. It was not forgiveness. It was not redemption. It was simply two souls who had walked different paths, understanding finally that paths could change even when destinations could not. When Sarah left, Vivian returned to her work. 10 more years stretched ahead. She would serve them fully, helping Omegas heal from trauma she had caused. And after that, if she survived, she would face choice. Stay and continue helping, building small amends from daily service. Or leave forever, carrying guilt to whatever territory would accept monster trying to become something less monstrous. Either way, Maren's death and Sarah's suffering and countless other harms would mark her forever. That was justice. That was mercy. That was both and neither and everything between. 5 more years passed. Connor turned 82 on bright spring morning that smelled of roses and new beginnings. He moved through Citadel slowly now, relying heavily on carved walking stick Owen had made for him. His mind remained sharp, but body was failing in increments that accumulated into significant limitations. Climbing stairs exhausted him. Standing for extended periods caused pain that radiated through hips and lower back. His hands shook with fine tremor that made writing difficult. Rowan monitored his health with increasing concern, but they both knew healers could only do so much. Time was not wound to be stitched or poison to be purged. It was simply inevitable. The 6 young wolves, now 15 years old but carrying physical maturity and life experience of wolves in their early 20s thanks to accelerated development of their first decade, had become established in their roles. They were technically still young, aging having slowed after year 10 to match normal pace, but they had already contributed more than many wolves did in full lifetimes. Connor spent his days quietly, attending council meetings when strength permitted, walking gardens with Owen when weather was fair, sitting in infirmary with Ash watching young healer work with skill that surpassed Rowan's. He trained with Garrett some mornings, movements now purely ceremonial, but connection to old friend and ritual of combat forms helped maintain mobility and dignity. Most evenings he spent with Sarah, talking about everything and nothing, making each moment count because both knew time was running short. They had been together 12 years, and in that time they had built something that felt eternal, despite knowledge that endings approached. One morning in late spring, Connor woke feeling different. Not worse exactly, but changed. Like some internal mechanism had shifted, deciding that borrowed time had run its course. He rose slowly, dressed carefully, and walked to gardens where Owen worked among early blooms. "These are beautiful," Connor said, gesturing to roses that filled beds in riot of color, red and white and gold and silver, each section devoted to memory, each bloom honoring sacrifice. "Thank you," Owen said. He was taller now, body having finished main growth spurt. His clubbed paw was permanent limitation he had long since made irrelevant through adaptation. "I designed them to bloom in succession. So there is always color, always life, always reminder that beauty can come from grief if we tend it properly." "That is profound wisdom," Connor said. He sat on bench Owen had placed beside memorial section, conserving strength that fled more quickly each day. "Come sit with me moment. There is something I want to tell you." Owen joined him, wiping dirt from his paws. "Are you well?" "I am old," Connor said, "and tired, and I think my time is ending soon. Do not look sad. This is natural. This is how life works." He looked at 6 sections of roses, each representing one of the young wolves plus Marin, plus Sarah, plus himself, plus hope for future. "You have all become exactly what I hoped you would be. Ash heals. Kai and Raya build bridges. Gray will rule with wisdom. Tessa protects. And you, Owen, you create beauty and teach patience. That is legacy worth having." "You taught us everything," Owen said. His voice was thick with emotion. "I taught you some things," Connor corrected, "but you each found your own paths, made your own choices. That is what I am proud of. Not that you did what I wanted, but that you became who you are meant to be." He placed hand on Owen's shoulder. "Thank you for showing me that imperfection is not weakness, that different can be gift, that what others view as limitations can become advantages if approached with wisdom and patience." They sat together in gardens, old king and young gardener, surrounded by beauty born from planning and tending and patience. When Connor finally stood to return to Citadel, he moved slower than ever before. Owen walked beside him, providing support without making it seem like burden, and Connor felt grateful for this young wolf who had taught him more than he had taught in return. Connor died 3 days later, quietly in his sleep, with Sarah beside him. She woke at dawn feeling his absence before confirming it, that terrible stillness that death brings. She did not cry immediately, did not scream or rage, simply lay beside body that had been partner and mate and friend for 12 years, memorizing his face in morning light, fixing details in memory that would have to sustain her through whatever time remained. "He was ready," she whispered. "He said everything he needed to say, did everything he wanted to do. He died complete." The Northern Territories mourned their king with depth that surprised even Connor's closest allies. Warriors and Omegas, Alphas and Pups, wolves from every pack territory came to pay respects. They lined roads as his body was carried to royal burial grounds. They sang traditional songs and told stories of his justice and mercy and strength. But grief was not hopeless. It was grief of those who understood that endings allowed new beginnings, that leaders who prepared successors gave greater gifts than leaders who clung to power until death pried their fingers loose. Gray stood before Omega Council 3 days after Connor's death and formally accepted role of Alpha King. He was 15 years old chronologically, but carried maturity and experience of wolf twice that age. Young by traditional standards, but he had been trained by the best. He had learned that leadership was service, that power existed to protect, that justice required mercy as much as strength. His first act as king was to establish Connor's law as permanent and unchangeable. The Omega protection laws would never be repealed. The council structure would never be dissolved. The commitment to justice over convenience would never waver. These were not suggestions. They were foundations upon which everything else rested. His second act was to name his siblings to advisory roles. Ash as chief healer with authority over medical policy, Kai and Raya as diplomatic envoys with power to negotiate treaties, Tessa as guard commander with responsibility for all military matters, Owen as keeper of remembrance, tending gardens that held memorials and teaching others about patience and growth. "This is not my kingdom," Gray said in his coronation speech. "It is our kingdom, built by those who came before, maintained by those who serve now, preserved for those who will come after. I accept this crown not as symbol of power, but as symbol of responsibility. I will serve until I am no longer capable, and then I will pass this crown to whoever proves worthy through service, not blood." The assembled wolves, thousands strong, erupted in approval. This was not typical coronation of young alpha claiming birthright. This was transfer of authority based on preparation and merit, and demonstrated commitment to values that transcended individual ambition. The years that followed proved Connor's vision correct. Gray ruled with wisdom beyond his apparent years, guided by Omega Council, and advised by siblings who each brought specialized expertise. Northern territories flourished. Incidents of Omega abuse became rare enough to merit investigation when they occurred. Trade increased. Disputes were resolved through negotiation rather than violence. Young wolves grew up expecting protection and justice rather than hoping for it. The inner circle served as long as they could, teaching next generation everything they had learned. Garrett died at 85, still teaching sword forms to young warriors, emphasizing discipline over aggression. Thorin passed at 83, his network of scouts and information gatherers operating with efficiency he had built over 8 decades. Finn died at 78, his logistics systems ensuring supply lines that prevented famine. Rowan lived to 75, training Ash until his final day, passing peacefully in same infirmary where he had saved countless lives. Declan, Connor's beta and brother in all but blood, died at 80, speaking final words of advice to Gray before closing his eyes for last time. Each death diminished the world, but each death also proved how well they had prepared next generation. Systems they built continued. Values they taught persisted. Changes they fought for became permanent, not because they remained to enforce them, but because those who came after understood their importance and chose to maintain them. Sarah lived to see all 6 of her children fully established in roles where they thrived. She lived to see grandchildren, young wolves born carrying forward bloodlines that might have been extinguished in Blizzard 15 years before. She lived to see Northern territories transformed from place of fear and tyranny to place of justice and opportunity. She died at 68, peacefully, surrounded by children and grandchildren and wolves who called her mother even though she had not birthed them. Her last words were simple. "Tell them I loved them. Tell them I was proud. Tell them to continue the work." They buried her beside Connor in Royal Gardens, beneath roses that Owen had planted and tended for decades. Markers were simple stone, bearing names and dates and nothing more. But beside them, larger monument was erected, carved with words Ash had written. "Here lie Connor Ironwood and Seraphina Whitlock, Alpha King and Luna Queen of the Northern Territories. They found each other in a blizzard. They built justice from mercy. They proved that strength serves no purpose except protection. We remember, we honor, we continue their work." And Northern Territories did continue, generation after generation, building on foundations laid by old warrior who learned late that greatest battles were not fought with swords, and young Omega, who taught everyone that courage wore no single face. Winters came and went, springs bloomed eternal, and somewhere in gardens, among flowers tended by Owen's own children and grandchildren, wolves still told story of how their world changed because one king chose mercy over vengeance, because one Omega chose to save rather than abandon, because 6 pups were protected when they could have been destroyed. Story became legend, legend became truth, and truth was simple. Justice required courage, mercy required strength, and changing world required nothing more and nothing less than choosing every day to protect vulnerable, honor fallen, and build something better than what came before. That was Connor's oath. That was Sarah's gift. That was legacy that lived forever in hearts of wolves who learned that winter's cruelty could be survived and spring's hope could be real. Northern Territories had bent toward justice, and it stayed bent because strong hands had shaped it, and wise hands maintained it, and every new generation understood that what had been won could be lost if forgotten. So they did not forget. They honored, they remembered, they continued. And in gardens where Connor once walked slowly on failing legs, where Sarah once sat surrounded by 6 pups who climbed over her like mountains to be conquered, where Owen had created beauty from earth and memory, roses bloomed eternal. Red for Marin, who sacrificed everything. White for Sarah, who survived impossible odds. Gold for Connor, who learned that strength meant protection. Silver for hope that even longest winter must eventually yield to spring. The story was over. The legacy remained, and that, in end, was all that anyone could ask.